Chapter 10. Secrets. "You're like totally late," the merchant called. He was leaning over the side of his ship, his blonde hair blowing in the breeze and his ruffled pink shirt flying open. England rolled his eyes. He'd radioed the Krakers 2 days before to set up a trade arrangement. Poland never asked questions, and as such, he could think of no one better to trade supplies with. They'd use the goods they'd garnered from the Desenvold Islands raid to procure enough to keep them going for a few weeks, enough for the time they needed to spend out of the sky. They'd already needed supplies before the Cosmida attack, and as such, he'd already contacted Poland. Now they needed them more. The Victoria docked against the merchant ship, and England stepped over onto the Krakers. "All things considered, it's astounding we are only an hour late for our appointment," he shouted back. Poland nodded. "Well, I've already got your order ready and stuff, so we can make this snappy if you want." England was next to Poland now. "We'll actually need more than we requested." Poland flipped his wrist at the pirate. "Whatever, as long as you've got the goods, that's fine. Hey wait, your ship is totally trashed." His head had snapped toward the tattered sails of the Victoria, the orange sunset beaming through the torn fabric. England caught him surveying his bandaged cheek as well. He gritted his teeth and pulled at the black gloves he'd slipped on to cover his injured hands. "I thought you didn't ask questions, you bloody bender." Poland put his palms in front of him. "Whoa, back it up. I didn't ask you anything." He paused. "But I totally want to know." He raised his eyebrows and his lips curled up in a small smile, as if he were expecting a certain answer from him. England braved it. "What could be the harm?" "Cosmida attack, surely you know of them." "Thought so," Poland replied, his smile vanishing. He bit his lip. "Follow me, Captain Kirkland. I have tons of things I can tell you." "Whatever do you mean?" England furrowed his brows and crossed his arms. He pouted. "The Cosmida, duh. I've got information." England's lips firmed into a grim line. "How do I know this is legit? That it's not a trap?" Poland leaned against the side of the ship. "God, what the heck? Bring your pistol and your sword. You totally have permission to shoot me and stab me and stuff if I'm lying to you." England contemplated the situation. Poland, the bubble-headed merchant, had information on the Cosmida he was willing to offer. The information might be sketchy, but what was the risk in listening? He nodded. "How much for the information?" "No material charge." "What?" Poland's expression turned dead serious. "I have personal reasons for spreading this information. I only asked one thing in exchange for it." England motioned him to continue. Poland leveled him a look with his deep green eyes and firmly placed his hands on England's shoulders. "Don't keep it to yourself. You have to tell everyone you can that you think is safe." He turned his face toward the sky, to the east, where Med began thousands of kilometers away. "The more people who know, the sooner he can be saved." A sharp breeze stifled the last half of his sentence, and England was scarcely able to make it out. So there were reasons, deeply personal ones. He wasn't offering this information because he, like every other merchant, wanted to merely take down the Cosmida. He was providing it because someone he knew needed to be saved. He didn't question further. It was none of his business. "If this information is good, I will let others know," England assured him. "It's good." Poland's expression was steely, unlike anything England could have imagined on him before now. "Now be fabulous and come inside with me now." England nodded and followed Poland down into the ship. The smell of cigars wafted through the air and increased the murky darkness of the bar, lit only by colored lamps hanging from the ceiling and a strip of lights behind the bar. La Baie Mesa was the most popular bar for the servicemen stationed at the Aquila base. Loud music from the islands between Papagayo and Aquila blared across the room, a scratchy record player and a large set of speakers serving as the source. America was glad that he'd chosen to invite Canada here. There was enough commotion and conversation that no one would notice what they were talking about. They'd have to sit just inches away to even hear each other. He spotted the back of Canada's head, his chin-length wavy hair a dead giveaway, and strode up to him, sliding a stool out and sitting next to him at the bar. "Hey, America, there you are." Canada turned to him, his blue-violet eyes concerned. Absently, he swirled the stirrer in his drink. "Hey, Canada," America replied. An awkward silence fell between them, Canada continuing to stare at him in expectance. "I'm fine." "You mean?" America nodded. "My story checks out." He leaned back on his arms. "The colonel warned me, said to be careful from now on, but..." He bit his lip. "I'm kind of a..." "Well, he was pretty soft." "You're kind of a favorite." America shrugged. "Yeah, I guess." Canada took a swig from his glass. "Something is really bugging you, isn't it? That was a perfect opening for you to tell me how awesome you are." He grinned mischievously. "I am awesome." Canada placed his elbows on the bar and put his chin in his hands. "Where were you?" "Get me a drink first." Canada sighed in exasperation and ordered America a beer. Cuba shot America a dirty look as he slid the frosty glass toward him, muttering something about him being a total freeloader. America was his least favorite customer. He had built up a massive tab and was only slowly whittling it down. Much to Canada's dismay, Cuba usually mistook him for his cousin when he went to La Baie Mesa, and he had to deal with an earful of angry bartender before clarifying that he was Canada, not America. Happy now? Canada wasn't truly upset about paying for his cousin's drink, at least not today. He was just relieved he was okay. America wiped a bit of foam off his lip. Well, England made me carry through on that promise." "Promise?" "Oh." He hadn't mentioned that to Canada. "When I went to pick up my watch, I had to make a promise to him to get it back." "You made a deal with a pirate?" His eyebrows shot up. "I didn't have a choice." America defended. "And he told me it wouldn't be anything unheroic, so I agreed." "I mean, I didn't right away or anything." Canada glanced to America's belt, where his prized fob watch was looped. America untied the watch, tossing it back and forth from hand to hand. He adjusted his glasses and took a swig from his glass. "I guess I should tell you what happened from there." And he began to explain England's distress call and the vicious Cosmoda and what had actually happened to his radio. He skirted around a lot of details, preferring not to talk about those awkward moments with England or the conversations they'd had or the invitation, of sorts, that England had given him to contact him again. America entered another beer before they were done, and when he finished, Canada was wide-eyed and gaping, his drink forgotten entirely. "So that's the end then, right?" Canada finally spoke. "You fulfilled your promise, sir." "Do you mean will I see him again?" America inquired. He was looking down into his glass as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. Canada nodded. "Oh, of course not." And Canada hoped to God it was the drink causing America's cheeks to turn bright red as he said that, because America hadn't described England's actions in the battle or his night aboard the ship with dismay, but with genuine excitement. Knowing him, he hadn't even realized he'd told his tale in such a way. And when he talked about England particularly, his voice rose in pitch and his enthusiasm mingled with something else, something Canada couldn't quite pinpoint. He lit up when he spoke of England. Admiration wasn't right, pride wasn't either. He didn't know what it was, and his mind wouldn't allow him to think further into it. It was as if there were a subconscious roadblock that disallowed him even considering that his cousin might. "Well, he's a pirate," Canada interrupted his own thoughts. "I'm sure he can handle himself just fine, eh?" America looked to the side, his eyes downcast and a frown on his face. "Why, yeah, I guess so." Canada exhaled deeply. "Be careful, America." "Huh?" He turned, placing a firm hand on America's shoulder. "I can't tell you what to do." Canada stifled an ironic laugh. "It's not as if you ever listened to me anyway." He paused, leveling America a serious look. "I understand why you did what you did, but if you go back, that's dangerous." "It's not dangerous," America snapped. His eyes clenched shut, his lips formed a tight line, and he gesticulated rapidly with his hands, as if searching for the right words. It's not like he's dangerous. He vaguely wondered if he was dreaming. America, so strong in his convictions, so stalwart in his quest to be the hero, to fight off villains, which had always included pirates, he recalled from when they played together as children, was defending this pirate Captain Kirkland. And he was worried about him. He cared about England. He was of the opinion that he knew America better than anyone else, but this went against everything he knew about his cousin. Did America have any idea what he was saying? Was he even consciously aware of what the manner in which he was speaking implied? Canada doubted it. Why don't we go back to the base, eh? Canada forced a friendly smile. I bet you're tired. America nodded in the affirmative. Canada paid their bill and they left together. Full House, Liechtenstein proclaimed, had turned a combination of sweet and smug. She placed the cards down onto the deck of the ship, and Prussia, Romano, and Sealand let out various expletives at her hand. Spain laughed and Switzerland shot deadly glares at everyone who was cursing at his sister. How the hell does she always win? Prussia grumbled, throwing his cards into the middle. I give up, Dan. Liechtenstein blushed. I suppose I'm just a natural at poker. She's got to be cheating. Romano accused. Switzerland cocked his rifle. My sister would not cheat. His voice was defensive to a degree that terrified Spain's first mate. All right, geese. The sun was descending further beyond the horizon as the Victoria's crew awaited England's return from Poland's ship. Spain and Romano had come up about an hour before for the first time, having decided that fresh air was exactly what they needed, despite their injuries. Prussia had, true to his word, been sitting on the deck all day drinking beer, though he hadn't been as successful at getting everyone to wait hand and foot on him as he'd wished. England is taking a while, Sealand noted. Ah well, he is to get the supplies packed up and negotiate what they'll be trading, Spain countered. He's going to need a lot, so I imagine we could be waiting some time. Prussia stretched out his legs. Well, I'm bored of poker. Only because you're losing, Switzerland quipped. Nah, maybe I just have something more awesome to do, he countered. Like what? Romano asked. Prussia's lips curled up into a smirk and he laughed. I just happened to overhear some interesting things between England and the Aviator this afternoon. He paused for effect. England probably didn't think I'd hear it, but I'm pretty damn good at eavesdropping if I do say so, which I do. Spill it, Sealand demanded. Prussia pulled his legs toward his chest, sitting cross-legged. Well, first. He gestured with his finger as if he were about to make a list. First he confessed his undying love for America, saying that he never thought he'd feel this way about a man, let alone a member of the military. It was so romantic. He faked a sniffle and a melodramatic swoon. The wedding's next week, by the way. Everyone stifled laughter. That's not what happened, Switzerland said with a roll of his eyes, although he couldn't hide his amusement. Oh right. I forgot to mention the wedding night. We should probably make sure we are not on the shit then, it could get rowdy, he snickered. Still, it's good he's taking this seriously. At first I thought America was just going to be his boy toy, but it looks like he's really committed to the relationship. That's fucking awesome. Of course, since he's such a blushing virgin, I guess it makes sense he wasn't just looking for sex. Come on, what did you really hear? Romano shouted. His cheeks were red, as Spain had just tried to pull him into his lap, and he'd smacked his leg and scooted away. Right. It wasn't that, but it may as well have been, Prussia rectified. He told America his private frequency. The shock was apparent on everyone's faces when he finished. I'm completely serious this time. He told him we were hiding out and how to get a hold of him. He even went the extra mile and told him how to contact him through Hungary. He can't just give that information out. Sealand piped in. He's the captain, so he can do what he wants, but... Spain was tapping his chin. It's a pretty serious amount of trust he's put in America, though. But the captain hates military, Liechtenstein countered. He does, but for some reason I don't understand. America seems to be the exception, Switzerland replied. Prussia closed his eyes and sighed. I'll tell you why. It's damn obvious. He's fucking infatuated with the guy. Spain laughed. Why, no, I have to agree with you there. I can't really reconcile with this. Switzerland tossed a gun from hand to hand, which made everyone else flinch. I trust the captain, but how exactly has America and that level of distrust? Spain tugged on Romano's arm, and this time his first mate gave in, scooting back toward him. He's a good guy, America is. He did help save us. Still, you wouldn't be on this ship if you didn't believe in Captain Copeland, would you? Spain made eye contact with each and every one of them. They all looked down ruefully. I'm sure he knows what he's doing, okay. True, Prussia said. I mean, if he's attracted to the guy, that could in no way influence his judgment or anything. Spain shot Prussia a hard, serious look. Trust him. He's been a captain for longer than any of you all have even been pirates. But England getting along with trusting a member of the military. Prussia stretched his legs back out. It's like I've woken up inside some sort of weird alternate universe where it's always opposite day or something. Spain picked up the cards from the middle of the circle they all sat in and began shuffling them. Well, people change. Prussia snorted. Yeah, who would have guessed? All it really takes to soften England up is a hot blonde flyboy with baby blue eyes and a hero complex the size of the sky. Switzerland stifled an amused smile. I guess we've all been going about getting on his best side entirely the wrong way all this time. Spain held up the shuffled stack of cards. Another round of poker. Nothing I've told you will like, bring the Cosmoda down on its own, Poland explained. My source is totally reliable, but even he doesn't find out all the stuff there is to know. And there are some limits to what he can gab about to me. If it's something Russia has only told him, there's just no way. Russia will know like that he was the one to spill it. So, I've pretty much told you a lot of what I know. England nodded. Quite understandable. They were sitting in chairs in Poland's office, and he found himself absently toying with the fabric of a pink blanket that rested on the arm of the recliner he sat in. Do you happen to know anything about their attacks on pirate ships? Poland shrugged. They totally want to take out all the sky pirates. I figured that much out myself. Everything the Cosmoda does is, so calculated. They don't do anything on impulse. England placed his hands under his chin and leaned forward. Bloody tossers probably have a plan to obliterate the Victoria already. Yeah, pretty much, Poland agreed. I will find a manner in which to warn as many crews as I can, he assured. Poland nodded. You would so not believe the Cosmoda's forces. They are just getting bigger by the day. 10 zeppelins have become 100, Poland continued. It's totally hard to believe, but this group hasn't even been around for more than about 6 months. That's when they took Lee, he cut himself off. They've got insane amounts of money backing their cause. England frowned. Who? Who in their right mind would back such a group? Poland rolled his eyes. Obviously they're not in their right mind, duh. And I have no idea actually. He couldn't give me that information. Perhaps if we could just go to their base and... No can do. Their base is always moving, it's a really huge zeppelin, he interrupted. England sighed. I suppose that was to be expected. You got anything else? I've got one more thing. Poland reached behind him and pulled a sheet of paper out of an elaborate brass typewriter. It's a list of names. Every single ranked member of the Cosmoda. England reached for it and Poland pulled it out of his grasp. One more promise you totally have to make. What is it? He raised his eyebrows. If you meet anyone on this list, you must not hurt them. You can capture them or whatever, but if you kill them I will. His expression darkened and England found himself alarmed at the change in mood. Oh wait. He understood. One of them is your friend, is it not? He queried. Pollen nodded. I will not harm any of them. He reached out his hand and offered it to the merchant, who took it and shook. It also has some specifics on the mechanics of the zeppelins they use, which I totally don't understand, but I figured might be useful. He slipped the paper into Inland's hand. Now let's get your supplies ready. What kind of stuff do you have to offer in trade? I trust it's as fabulous as it usually is. Yes, it's quite a good haul, actually, he replied. I'll have it brought aboard by my crew once I decide what I need from you. England stood up and pocketed the sheet of paper. He and Pollen stepped out into the hallway, the creaky old engine shooting loud puffs of steam as they made their way to Pollen's supply storage. Chapter 11. In the news. Veneziano sprang out of his chair and bounced over to the phone, picking it up with an excited, Lieutenant Vargas speaking. Lieutenant Vargas, it's Captain Jones, came the reply from the other end of the line. Veneziano smiled and leaned his head back toward Germany. Germany, Germany. Captain Jones is on the phone. He nodded and walked briskly over, reaching for the phone. Ah. This phone call is actually for you, Lieutenant, America clarified, his voice cheerful, almost laughing. Germany. Did you hear that? Captain Jones wants to talk to me. Veneziano pulled away the receiver and pressed his hand against it. Very well, Germany replied and sat back down, a small smile crossing his lips as he watched Veneziano. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Is there anyone in the room you don't feel like you can trust completely? Veneziano bit his lip and didn't hesitate before replying. Just Germany, and I trust him with anything. There's nothing you could tell me that you can't tell him. All right, if you insist. America took a deep breath. I met your brother. Romano, you met Romano. Veneziano exclaimed. But how? Germany's interest was piqued at this. His eyebrows raised and he tuned his ears toward the phone call. That's kind of why I'm calling you. At this, America's voice shifted dramatically. He sounded serious, almost distressed. Veneziano's eyes widened. Is something wrong? His knees wobbled under him, nearly buckling. Your brother is fine. America rectified quickly. But the ship is on was attacked by the Cosmida. Veneziano's breath hitched in his throat. I thought that I should tell you about it, cause, well. How is everyone else? Is he hurt? Veneziano was panicked, his free hand clenched tightly in the fabric of his shirt. Spain and Romano were the only survivors. And he got banged up, but is not seriously injured, America explained. Veneziano didn't fight the tears that filled his eyes. He'd never been the type to deny himself a good cry. But his brother was okay, and as much as it hurt to think of the fates of the other crew members, most of whom he'd met only in passing, Romano was alive. He hadn't seen him in half a year. Oh God, if he died and that had been the case, he didn't know what he'd. They are staying on another ship right now, America interrupted. The Victoria? Veneziano asked with a sniffle. He knew that the Taliesin pirates were the greatest allies of his brother's crew. He glanced back at Germany, who was listening intently, his eyes having grown wide at the shift in conversation to the other crew. Another thought struck in. If it's the Victoria, is everyone okay? The other end of the line went quiet. How did you? Yes, everyone on the Victoria is going to be fine. You can thank them for saving the day. Well, and me. I was a pretty big hero out there. Thank you, Captain Jones, Veneziano replied, truly grateful. Just doing my job. Veneziano pressed his hand to the receiver once more and beamed back at Germany. Did you hear that? Everyone on the Victoria is okay. That's wonderful. Veneziano, America used his first name and his voice was intent, resolute, firm. Yes? It's real dangerous out there right now. The Cosmida. I've seen them now and, well, I'll be honest, I was scared. He let out a short, almost embarrassed laugh. I mean, not much scares me, but you know. America exhaled deeply. Just keep your brother close, okay? Veneziano nodded. I will keep my brother close, he repeated. His eyes flitted to Germany once more, who looked away, as if avoiding Veneziano's gaze. England had hidden away in his cabin. The ship was on track toward its destination, and he'd entrusted Switzerland with navigation as needed. He just wanted some time alone, without his chaotic crew and all the conflict that came with them, or the baggage that came with Spain and Romano's appearance on the ship. Or the constant taunting he received about America. That was the worst. He flushed, his cheeks hot at the thought of Precious' frequent snipes about boy toys and all that rubbish. Plus, he'd had to contact crews regarding the Cosmoda information. He'd just gotten off the radio with the USxUK pirates. Sighing to himself, he pulled needle and thread through and finished stitching up the hole in his hat. America had quipped about it maybe being important or something, but in truth he was right. He'd had that old hat since he first became captain. And before that the hat. England shook his head and tied off the last stitch. He longed to work on his needlepoint, which always calmed him, but he knew with an injured hand he couldn't handle the tiny stitches and detail required to do so. And speaking of, England glanced at his bandaged hand with a frown. You have to change it once a day. America's demand was simple enough and obvious as well. But in truth, he'd completely forgotten to do so until now. He slid open one of his drawers, immaculately organized, and snatched a roll of clean bandages. Then he unwrapped his current bandage, the white fabric falling onto the floor and revealing the tender and swollen flesh beneath it. It looked better, he thought. The swelling had gone down, and while the wound was still fresh, it didn't appear quite as raw. There was a small wash basin by his bed, and he grabbed the bar of soap that sat beside it and dipped a cloth into the water, cleaning the wound and ignoring the searing pain that overcame him as the rough fabric pressed against it. He dried it off and gently wrapped a new bandage around his hand. Once he'd tied it off, he leaned down to pick the discarded one up off the floor. England paused, old bandage in hand, and his mind flashed back to America chiding him over the injury. Stupidly heroic, those had been his exact words, although he'd backtracked on them when England had pointed it out. A half-smile crossed his face, unbidden. That insufferably stupid man would simply not leave his mind. This had been a constant state of affairs the past several days. After the first visit it was him wondering why he couldn't hate America, after the second it was his constant curiosity over whether America could keep his promise, and as much as he loathed admitting it, the greater part of it had hoped he'd be proven wrong and that America would come, guns blazing, to help when he called. After the third, well, his mind was a jumble. There was irritation, there was worry, there was confusion, and worst of all, the thing he hated to admit most, there was fondness. He cursed the smug flyboy inwardly for forcing him to become fond of him, as clearly it was America's fault. He didn't know how, but as he could scarcely think of more than a couple things he found remotely likable about the man, it was the only reasonable conclusion he could come to. Perhaps it was merely shallow. America was, he could not deny, extremely attractive. He remembered the way his bright blue eyes flickered, their gaze intent, when he'd surveyed England's wounds. He recalled his soft blonde hair that always stuck out at random points from his aviator cap. He was buoyant, and the very way in which he moved screamed of the freedom he found in the sky and his carefree youthfulness, untainted by the world. And his smile, that was the worst. It was bright and full of life and confident as all but Christ Almighty. It made him want to stare and not look away, and it was all America's fault, no doubt. England rubbed the bandage on his cheek, flushing. I should switch this one as well. He reached in the drawer and pulled out a piece of gauze and a roll of tape, then washed and replaced that bandage. It was then that he noticed that he was still holding the bandage he'd been given the previous night. He threw it onto his desk as if it were a hot coal. But he wouldn't trust someone he merely found attractive. And he trusted America with a great secret. He'd put him on the same level of his closest allies, and he knew it. England clenched his eyes shut and rubbed his forehead, spotting his personal radio when he opened them. You could contact him. He shook his head. You have information on the Cosmoda. He should know, right? England excused. But America would contact him if he so wanted to see him again. Why bother if America had no interest in meeting another time? Idiot, it's not about seeing him again, it's about working against the Cosmoda, he told himself, not entirely convinced. He'd try the radio in his plane on the off chance he was there. If not, he could try the crank radio he'd loaned him. England toyed with the radio, his hands shaking. The radio crackled and whined as he searched for the correct frequency. There. "Hey America, hey America." He gritted his teeth and switched the radio off, swifter than he was certain he was capable of. Fucking hell. England shoved himself out of the chair and threw his body onto the bed, his stomach against the mattress, his hands underneath his forehead, and his reddening face muffled into the pillow. It was so like the previous night, when America had left him behind on the deck. He'd shoved his face beneath his arms in an attempt to convince himself that he wasn't insanely, ridiculously flustered. But he wasn't foolish enough to deny that he had been, and he was now as well. What the hell was his problem? Somewhere in his subconscious, an answer to that flickered to life, but England quashed his train of thought before it could become anything more than that, a glimmer of something at the back of his mind. It started appearing more predominantly in the newspapers, Japan noted as he threw that day's issue onto the table, folded in half. America frowned, taking the paper and shaking it open. It was tucked at the bottom of the front page, but it was on the front page nonetheless. "Attacks continue on merchant ships," he read the headline. Japan nodded. It's been in the paper before, but always tucked as a small footnote inside. America skimmed the article, resting his chin on his hand as he did so. "It sucks. Captain." Japan sat down next to his superior and glanced over at him. America sighed and slid his hand down his face. "This is a worldwide catastrophe, Japan. And this article makes it sound like a couple of idiots in a zeppelin are flying around getting a few lucky shots in on merchant ships. Just merchant ships too. What else would it be? There hasn't been an attack on military vessels yet." Japan raised an eyebrow. "Pirates," the word died on America's lips before he could speak it. This is a big deal, Japan. Why are they trying to make it into something less?" Japan frowned. "Maybe the Cosmoda won't amount to much." America shot him a steely glare. "They will." And so forceful was America's tone that Japan merely nodded and didn't question him. "But we have been receiving some intelligence on them lately. I'm sure you know." "Yeah. General Wen contacted the base today," Japan noted. "Have you heard yet?" America shook his head in the negative. "The Navy has been scouting around, picking up stragglers from fallen ships. He found a huge mess the other day about 200 kilometers west of Lon." America gripped the edge of the table, his breath catching in his throat. What? A merchant ship and a pirate ship, both in shambles. Most of the wreckage had already sunk, of course. There were also 2 fallen zeppelins, so it appears whoever this was put up a fight. "Well, there were reports of attacks there," America replied, his voice having grown quieter. He hadn't told Japan or France about his whereabouts 6 days before. Indeed, it had been almost a week since he'd last spoken to England. He wondered how he was. Perhaps he should contact. "Yes, I remember that," Japan replied. "Well, General Wen." "Wait!" America shouted. "Were there any survivors?" His knuckles were now white from gripping the table. "I'm afraid not," Japan spoke morosely. America deflated, his small string of hope having been cut. He prayed that Japan did not notice how unusually enthusiastic he'd been in asking. "General Wan, China has been extremely helpful. Information on the Cosmoda is supposedly difficult to come by. We saw for ourselves how elusive they are." Japan averted his dark eyes. "It's not right that the newspapers are treating this like a serious threat, but for now it's best we just follow orders. I'm sure the military will have this all worked out." America bit his lip and went silent for several moments. "Why, yeah, I guess," he finally spoke. Japan couldn't help but notice that for once, his captain didn't agree right away to put his confidence in the military. It was at that awkward moment that Franz chose to gallivant into the hangar, a smirk on his face. "Afternoon, you two." He went and pulled out a chair, sliding into it across from America and Japan. "Afternoon," Japan replied, polite as ever. America crinkled his nose, finally registering Franz's appearance. He was wearing a white shirt, buttons half undone and hanging off one shoulder as if it had been stretched. There were, oh God, lipstick marks pressed all over his visible chest and up onto his neck. "Ah, Franz. Take a fucking shower or change clothes or... Is my attire a problem?" Franz feigned innocence, which America found to be pointless, as no one could ever convince him that Franz was innocent of anything. "I assure you this shirt is my uniform shirt, and these pants are regulation as well." Japan was pointedly looking away, seemingly embarrassed at the mere presence of Franz and his lipstick-stained chest. "Look, we are working here. You don't use your lunch break to have sex with a random lady at the nearest bar or whatever and then subject us to the nasty evidence of it." America leaned forward on the table as he spoke. Franz chuckled, one eyebrow rising. "Ah, but the question is, who says it was a random lady? Okay, your exploits with queens or dudes and lipstick or hell, inanimate objects." "I never know with you," America huffed. "Inanimate objects?" Franz gasped, mock scandalized. "That is not my thing." Japan was now hiding behind the paper, his body leaning over the table in attempt to ignore the entirety of the scene in front of him. "If it moves, it's your thing." "You underestimate my taste," Franz argued. America rubbed his forehead, giving up. "Just button up your damn shirt." "Ah, but..." "Captain's orders." Franz pouted and buttoned his shirt. "Captain," he used the term teasingly, "if we are such outstanding aviators, which some of us are, why have we been sitting at base for the last week doing nothing? There are things going on out there, many things." America shook his head. Japan had put the paper down, as it was safe to look up now. "I don't know, damn it," he grumbled. "Trust me, if it were up to me, would be out there fighting off zeppelins right now." Franz smirked. "Ah, is the favorite feeling a bit rebellious?" America's blue eyes flitted to the side, and he caught his plane out of the corner of his eye. "It's just..." He paused. Did he really want to say this to Franz? "We are the heroes, and we are sitting around waiting until it's okay for us to fight. Because it's not time yet to go to war, because a certain amount of people have to die first. I don't even know why." Franz's eyes widened. Japan looked shocked as well. One person dying is too many, and it's already gone way beyond that. Fuck it. He clenched his eyes shut. "I just want to be in my plane taking those damn bastards down, finding out who is in charge and..." "America," Franz interrupted, voice surprisingly soft. "Calm down." The younger man took a deep breath, inwardly counting an attempt to assuage his anger. Sorry. I'm not sure what happened there." "Being part of the military doesn't mean you always have to agree with them," Franz began. "True, that may be one of the reasons why they like you so much." America opened his mouth to protest, but Franz continued. "But blind devotion only leads to trouble." America nodded. "To think you don't have the right to disagree. You are so naive." "Yeah, you tell me that all the damn time." "It's only the truth." Franz shrugged. "I'm sure even Goody Two-Shoes Captain America has a bit of a rebellious streak to him." He winked suggestively. America nodded. "God, you make everything sound so pornographic." Franz placed his hand over his chest, faking innocence again. "Truly, America, your mind is soundly in the gutter. Why do you insist on assuming my words are laced with innuendo?" Japan rolled his eyes and sighed deeply. "Captain, I'm sorry, but I must request that I don't believe you should even dignify that with an answer." "Request granted." America grinned. Chapter 12. Cosmida. Estonia, Latvia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia's arms were folded behind his back, and he walked in front of each of the four. He paused once he got to the fifth of them, his lips turning up into a cold smile. Lithuania. The 5 members of the Cosmoda present saluted, hands across their chests in a fist. Russia, sir. Now Lithuania. He shot a pointed glance at him. You have returned from your mission near Hetalia. What do you have to tell me? Lithuania shuddered, feeling the intensity of Russia's gaze. We completed the mission successfully, sir. Details. Lithuania hesitated, and Estonia took advantage of it. Russia, sir, he spoke up, his voice loud and commanding. Leave Lithuania alone today. He's done enough for you already. A tangible silence fell in the room as the other 4 Cosmoda members and their leader looked to Estonia. The sound of the steam engines, far below in the bowels of the Zeppelin, was the only thing piercing the quiet. Estonia, Lithuania finally spoke, motioning in front of him with his hands. I'm fine, really. Russia grinned at Estonia as if he were a Cheshire cat who refused to show his teeth. Estonia, I don't believe Lithuania is in need of any defense. His proficiency in completing the mission shows well that he's quite capable of defending himself if he needs to. He paused, snapping his head back toward Lithuania. And surely he would not be so excellent at it if he didn't enjoy being my general, right, Lithuania? Lithuania stood firm, willing his knees not to buckle under Russia's watchful eye. 425 kilometers south of Hetalia, near the BNG Chennai shelf, we encountered the Gagaria pirate crew. He quaked, attempting to keep his expression neutral. We escaped with little damage, sir. They were not the formidable opponents the Nubaru and Taliesin proved to be, Lithuania finished, and it scared him that he was able to deliver the message, a message that they'd successfully obliterated the Gagaria without faltering. Very good. He walked down the line again, and each person stiffened as he passed them by. Ukraine. Sir? How is the Zeppelin construction faring in Medved? Ukraine smiled weakly, wiping away a tear that had pulled in the corner of one of her eyes. Well, sir. Our armada is growing. We'll be able to double it in size within the next month, and there is plenty of money yet left, even doing that. Very good, he drawled out slowly. You're so reliable, dear Ukraine. He patted her on the shoulder. Now continuing on, it's your turn now, Latvia. The smallest and youngest member of the core group of the Cosmoda darted his head up, his shoulders shaking. We've eliminated 2 Sky Pirate crews, but we have many more to go. We must speed up. Now why are we going after the Sky Pirates first? Latvia gulped, and Lithuania shot him a sympathetic look. BB because we don't have enough steam power to face the military yet, sir. And? It's the East Party uprising, isn't it? Estonia interrupted. Wait your turn please, Estonia, Russia requested, or threatened, based on his tone. Yes, we are all familiar with the East Party uprising, aren't we? They had grand ideas. I would very much have liked to help them. Why did it fail, Latvia? Latvia's violet eyes grew wide. The PPA rates, sir. Russia gestured him to continue. They didn't anticipate, that the pirates would fight against them, fight with the military. They were as surprised and unprepared. Battling pirates is nothing like battling the military. Surely you know that from the incident with the Taliesin. There's no protocol, and they fight with such willpower, such need for survival. It's difficult to crush their spirits. Russia's eyes flashed. Pirates are unpredictable, and the military is oh so very, very predictable. Once the pirates are gone, there will be no surprises. We will only need the steam power, manpower, and the armada Ukraine speaks of. He glanced to each and every one of them, a smile on his face and a cheerful note to his voice. Once they are eliminated, our path to victory is clear. Latvia fidgeted and stared at his feet. Lithuania. He started. Please come to my sitting room to discuss the details of our next mission in an hour, okay? Lithuania nodded. Yes, sir. Wait, shouted a new voice, that of the previously unaddressed swordsmaster, Belarus. What is it, Belarus? Her fists clenched and her lips formed into a tight line. Why did you not address me, Russia, dear? I had nothing more to discuss. He leveled her a look. I knew the answers to everything you asked, she continued, stepping out of line and stopping mere inches in front of Russia. I ham on your every sweet word, and the other Cosmoda members watched, rapt attention on her. I love you, I love you, I love you. She spoke it like a mantra, now tugging on the collar of Russia's uniform. Russia cringed. Belarus, you are the finest warrior the Cosmoda has. Then why am I not your right-hand man? What does Lithuania offer that I don't? She paused, running her hand down his chest. I offer so much more. We could be married and rule the skies together, she finished, huskily, her fingers now caressing his chin. Lithuania watched in amazement, gaining a sort of great pleasure out of seeing Russia so taken aback. He was well aware that Belarus was ruthless and quite possibly insane, but this was not something he'd anticipated. He hoped that Estonia, Latvia, and Ukraine were enjoying it as much as he was. Lithuania glanced around. Ukraine's expression was unreadable, Estonia was smirking, and the smallest of grins was gracing Latvia's face. Russia jerked away, his composure shaken. After taking a deep breath, he smiled and spoke, his deceptively sweet voice back in full force. You are immensely valuable, Belarus. Lithuania is an excellent general, but you belong on the battlefield. Your skill is unmatched, and there is no greater use for those skills than to remove enemies, for me. He laughed lightly. Ah, or for us, even. His words were like honey and Belarus melted into them, a satisfied smile crossing her face. Her cheeks flushed. Yes, Russia, dear. I will fight then, for us. For us? Lithuania shook his head. You will deceive anyone, even Belarus, so wholly devoted to you. This is for no one but you. My vlastolony nebs, Russia, dear, Belarus whispered and then leaned up, giving her commander a quick kiss before skipping off, the sound of her Mary Jane shoes clanking down the hallway. America rested his head on his arms, rolling his chin back and forth on top of the bar and heaving a sigh. After his outburst in the hangar and his frustration with the newspaper, he'd decided the best thing to do after work was to go out and grab a drink. It was the best idea he could think of that didn't involve flying. He was aching to get in his plane. Damn, maybe I should just radio England and dash, hey Cuba, get me another one. He reached up with one hand and shook his empty glass. Damn it, America. Cuba shouted, sliding a foaming glass of beer down the bar with all the force he could muster. America caught it nimbly in his hand, and Cuba cursed at his reflexes. Thanks for that. America bent, his million-watt smile earning only a furious glare from the bartender. Cheers. Cuba stomped over, stopping in front of America and leaning over the bar. Pay your damn tab tonight, and don't even think of sending your cousin in to do it in your place. But Cuba. It doesn't matter to me how ace you are back on the base. I don't give freebies to people just because they can fly a plane. Yeah, whatever, America grumbled, swallowing another gulp of his beer. He had paused to stretch out his legs when a tap on his shoulder startled him. He swiveled around, his eyes meeting a now fully clad and lipstick-free France. Bonjour, America, France said with a wave, pulling out a stool and sitting next to him. If you think I'm drunk enough to let you do anything, you're wrong. America frowned. This is only my second beer, so don't even. Just your second. Then sadly, you are not drunk at all, France mock-sighed. Although as much as I may wish otherwise, you have never been drunk enough to allow me to, you know. He winked. Shut up. What are you here for? Franz shrugged, his expression turning serious. I sympathize with your plight, America. He rested his chin on his hands, rubbing the stubble that covered it. They found the remains of another sky pirate ship. What? America's eyes grew large and he gripped his glass, panicked. Who? Franz cocked an eyebrow, confusion setting upon his features. No idea. I just overheard it a few minutes ago. But he couldn't finish because America had bolted out of his stool so fast he knocked it onto the ground, where it clattered noisily. He shoved aside several customers, darting out of the door and barely hearing, "Hey, get back here and pay your tab," from Cuba over the sound of his own wild heartbeat. He ran toward the base, the pavement under his feet turning into grass as he made shortcuts through fields instead of sidewalk. The lights of the base served as a beacon, but they weren't close enough. America had to get back to the hangar, had to radio England and make sure that, oh God, they were already weakened. Damn it, I should have checked on them before now. England is. No, he refused to think about it, instead choosing to concentrate on not slipping in the damp grass. He cut across the lawn to the gate, quickly flashing the guard his military ID before being let inside. America didn't slow down, even as his breath caught and he grew winded. His hammer wasn't far now, and when he made it there he dashed inside and jumped into his cockpit as if his life depended on it. The precious piece of paper, the one with England's frequency on it, was in his pocket. He hadn't thought about the fact that he stuck the note in his pants pocket every morning. It was just something he'd done. America felt as if it was safer to keep it close in case he needed to, well, in case of a situation like right now. He vaguely recalled England telling him to memorize the frequency and throw the paper out. Oops. He flipped on his radio and, with a silent prayer, turned the frequency to the one England had instructed him to use. England? England, are you there? Silence. America gritted his teeth. England, please answer me if you're there. It's me, America. A crackle on the other end of the radio, and then a rather bleary-sounding hello. England. Yes, it's me, America. For Christ's sake, don't shout. It's the middle of the bloody night. America exhaled and nearly shouted with joy at the weight being removed from his chest. You must be far away then. It's only 11 p.m. here. Oh, right, of course. America cleared his throat. England, are you all okay? Quite. Prussia, Spain, and Romano are recovering well, and the ship repairs have been going perfectly. That's great news. Why did you call me? America could have sworn England's voice was hesitant. He paused. I heard that a pirate ship was taken down by the Cosmoda. Had to make sure it wasn't you. Oh. Well. Thank you, America. We are quite all right. America's face brightened and he grinned. It's no problem. That's what heroes do. He paused. I mean, you are all Wassa pirates and I didn't know if you'd be able to handle. Shut up, you idiot. Oh, and I'm coming to see you. This was out of America's mouth before he had consciously registered what he was about to say, and he cursed under his breath. I mean, fuck. You want to come? And America must have been imagining the tinge of hope in England's voice. He rubbed his forehead, attempting to think of a reason for his outburst. Sure. He began. I talked to Romano's brother. We know each other, actually. Did a mission together. Anyway, I told Veneziano that I'd check on his brother in person, so I've got to come down there. It was a terrible lie. He hadn't told Veneziano that at all, but damn, it was the first idea that came to mind. I assure you that Romano's fine. England paused, but I suppose, if you need to see for yourself, I can give you our coordinates. All right. I'll write them down right now. No. What? When will you be leaving? America blinked and scratched his head. Tomorrow morning, I guess. That's maybe what, 8 a.m. my time. Noon here then. Radio me when you're off the base. I don't want to risk anyone overhearing our location. In fact, use the crank radio. Geez, England, so secretive. You know exactly why I am. A moment of silence. You should go. If you're talking from the base, it's best we keep this conversation short. America sighed. England was right. K, see you later. See you then. He heard England exhale. Oh, and America. Yeah. Good night. America flushed. Good night to you too, England. He clicked the radio off. Leaning back in his cockpit, America sighed and ran his hand down his face. Had he actually just told England he was coming to visit him? God, he didn't think about what he was blurting out at all, did he? He frowned. He'd have to make something up, tell Japan and France to relay if asked that he was following a lead on the Cosmoda or something. Feeling trapped in the stationary plane, America stepped out of his cockpit. Only to meet with the firm, hard gaze of his cousin. Canada's arms were crossed and his lips had formed into a thin line. Canada. America laughed nervously. It's a good thing I fixed that radio, eh? There was an edge to Canada's voice, something unusual from his soft-spoken cousin. Oh yeah. You did great. I really appreciate it. Don't go. Canada's hands were now fisted at his side, and he was staring at his feet. What? I was working late in my shop and saw you run in. I heard your radio conversation. Oh. America paused. Oh fuck. Canada snapped his head up. Look, I don't know what it is that's so special about this man, but you can't risk your job and your safety for him. It's not safe out there. Please, just listen to me this once. America stepped forward, took Canada's shoulders, and frowned. He paused. You what? I want to go, Canada. You're not stopping me. He closed his eyes and sighed in exasperation. I never can I? America let go of Canada's shoulders. There's no reason to. I can handle myself. But maybe I'll come back with information on the Cosmida. America countered. Maybe. Canada replied meekly, his voice having lost that earlier hint of assertiveness. Please, just think hard about it. A pirate ship. Come on, America. Whoever this England is, he isn't worth dash. Canada was interrupted by very loud, very robust laughter and the sound of someone padding out of the shadows toward them. America cursed as France made himself visible, his white bomber jacket slung over his shoulder and a smirk on his face. What's so funny? America snapped. You cannot be serious, France said, still laughing. I knew something had to be going on, but a pirate and a non, it is not the pirate part that is funny. America was glaring daggers at him now. England. Captain Kirkland. America's jaw was set into a firm line. You got a problem with that? It is hilarious enough that you, America, the superstar hero, are off moonlighting as a passenger aboard a pirate ship. It's not like that. I gather that this is not the first time you visited Captain Kirkland. France winked. America's cheeks reddened. Ah. It is worse than I thought. Your rosy cheeks are unmistakable. It's just hot in here, America argued lamely. Canada merely watched the exchange between the two. OUI. Especially when you are in love. At this, America's face exploded, fierce red, and he spluttered. Shut up. I was merely joking. France smirked. I did not think that was the case, but you have proven me otherwise. I am aghast. I assumed no man or woman could ever fall for England. I'm not. He blinked. What do you mean? How do you know him anyway? America recalled England bringing up France the first night they'd met. It's not a matter of knowing him, France said. I have only met him a few times, all but one of those just in passing. I landed on his ship once and he threw me off, rather violently I might add. But he has a reputation amongst those in the less regimented parts of the world. At this, Canada perked up. Of being rather unlikable. And of course, horrendously unattractive. He sighed. Eyebrows such as his I had never seen and hoped to never see again. America snorted. Yeah, 'cause you're so much better. Well, I thought that was a given. He placed one hand on America's shoulder. Even someone such as I would never assume to understand the strange ways in which love works. Stop it, France. That's fucking ridiculous. We are barely even friends. Your cheeks tell me otherwise. He poked America's flushed face. A lot makes sense now, certainly your sudden intense interest in defeating the Cosmida. And of course, your actions at the bar earlier. He rested his elbow on America's shoulder. Canada, you'd best give it up and let him go. But France. Canada argued. It may be a good thing. You know why you frustrate me, America, his tone switched to serious. Because you are good at what you do, but you are also excruciatingly naive and you'll be led around, have been led around, by those above you. America. He paused, meeting his captain's wide, confused and slightly angry, blue eyes. You can become magnifique if your mind becomes entirely your own. And if it takes England, the least suave pirate in the sky to do it, then well. He grinned cheekily. I wish you a long and happy life together. America slapped France away and crossed his arms. I'm going to bed. And when I leave tomorrow, tell my superiors if they asked that I've gone to tackle a Cosmida lead. He ran out of the hangar, eager to escape France's embarrassing comments and perhaps even stranger, his somewhat roundabout praise. Chapter 13. The Island. America's plane soared through the sky, wings cutting through the winds and clouds that surrounded him. The late afternoon sun shone brightly, and America found himself shielding his eyes with one hand for much of the flight. His arm was growing sore from the effort. The crank radio lay behind him, having been used to contact England several hours before. Their conversation had been short and to the point, the directions quickly given. He followed that with a goodbye, and then America smiled, unbidden. England had wished him clear skies on his journey. The easternmost edge of the Pardee Sea was where America was headed now, to a small atoll that America could find not even the slightest sign of on his map. He imagined that was the point, an isolated area that would be almost impossible to track. But he'd flown over hundreds of tiny islands, and although he'd been given the exact coordinates of this nameless circle of land surrounding a lagoon, he couldn't suppress his concern that perhaps he'd just missed it. America wiped his palm across his brow, the muggy tropical heat causing him to sweat. He'd long since slid off his bomber jacket and rolled up his sleeves. He had spent most of this journey trying his damnedest to think of everything but what he was doing. Why in the hell had he told England he'd come? And why had he been so insistent upon doing so when confronted by Canada and France? He could have just as easily radioed England back and told him he'd decided it wasn't necessary to come. But there had been something in England's voice that had resonated with him. "You want to come?" The way he'd asked that, the hint of something in his words. The way England's voice rose and pitched slightly, the earnestness of his statement. America thought that perhaps England may have heard the same thing in his words. Because that was how he felt. "I hope you're all right, England. I want to see you again." He flushed and then swore to himself that it was just the hate. The island England had described to him was in sight now. He double-checked his location and he lowered his plane slowly, judging the trajectory at which he'd need to land. Well, this is it. The atoll was beautiful from above, a lagoon of the richest teal, bleeding into cerulean in the deeper middle. A thin island encircled most of the atoll, lush green vegetation and sandy beaches visible as he descended upon it. America squinted as he made out the Victoria, floating in the shallow water as if it were an ocean-faring vessel instead of a skyship. Not 20 meters away from it was a small landing pad, and next to that, a beach. The beach was occupied, although from this distance, America couldn't tell who was who. America lowered his plane to the flight pad and landed, swift and easy. He popped open the cockpit and stepped out of his plane, stretching his arms and legs out immediately upon doing so. So hot. Better shed some more layers. Adding his vest and tie to the pile that contained his bomber jacket and aviator cap, America walked toward the beach. His boot-clad feet met with hot sand as he stepped off the landing pad, and it wasn't long before he was able to make out exactly what was occurring on the beach. Prussia was lounging in a wicker beach chair, all swim trunks and a loud tropical shirt. He had a very frosty-looking glass of beer in one hand. He snatched a towel from beside him when Switzerland walked by, smacking it against his rear. Switzerland turned around swiftly, and his fingers twitched at his side as he reached for a gun that wasn't there. Prussia laughed, and America could make out the loud peals from where he stood some distance away. He marched closer to the beach, now able to make out everyone's voices clearly. Liechtenstein and Sealand were both in shallow water, having a rather intense splash fight. And Romano, well, he looked fine. Spain was fast asleep, and Romano had buried the poor man in sand. Only his head and feet stuck out. And he was, oh God, America tried his damnedest not to laugh. He'd created two perfectly perky bumps out of sand atop where Spain's chest was surely buried. America couldn't miss the devious grin etched across Romano's face. "Make him bigger." Prussia yelled from his chair, and Romano happily obliged. What, did they come here to have a beach party? His face broke into a grin. Awesome, his thoughts were interrupted by a catcall, and he grimaced, knowing immediately who it must be from. Boy toy. Sure enough, Prussia had noticed him on the edge of the beach and was waving wildly, a smirk plastered across his face. America's cheeks pinked. "Shut up," he yelled, jotting the rest of the way to the section of the beach the crew of the Victoria was occupying. America stopped in front of Prussia's chair, hands on his knees and leaning over slightly as he caught his breath. "England spilled that you were coming at breakfast this morning." Wanted everyone to know so Switzerland didn't think you was someone else and like, shoot you down or something, I guess, Prussia said. Course he was bright red as he did this. Ha ha. Watching him squirm is pretty awesome. America ran his hand through his hair, sticky with sweat. Dude, it's fucking hot out. Do you want a beer or something? Ah, no. I'm fine, America replied, looking about the beach wildly. There was another figure on the beach that he hadn't noticed before. This man must have been the friend England spoke of. His skin was tan, bronzed by the sun, and he had short golden brown hair. He was hammering away at a large piece of wood, seemingly a part of the Victoria that needed repairing. America tore his eyes from the man, far more concerned with locating someone else. Looking for England. He glanced to Prussia, meeting his mischievous red eyes. End of the dock, brooding like the stodgy spoilsport he is. Guy wouldn't understand fun if it was giving him a lap dance while naked. He raised an eyebrow toward America. Course if you did that to him. America huffed and turned away, knowing that Prussia would get a rise out of his inexplicably blushing cheeks. He spotted the dock, and at the end of it, a lone figure. England, he wasn't wearing the beach attire the rest of his crew donned, but he, at the very least, was wearing short sleeves, rolled-up breeches, and his feet were bare. Wordlessly, America jogged toward the dock, his speed inhibited by his heavy boots sinking into the sand. Once he reached it, the wood clattered noisily under his feet as he walked along the dock. England turned around, closing the book he'd been reading and standing up. And America enveloped England in his arms. America hugged people. He hugged his friends and his cousin, and it was nothing strange. He cared about them, so why wouldn't he show it? But when he impulsively wrapped his arms around England upon reaching the end of the dock, his arms tied around his back and his chin on top of England's head, his mind froze up. Oh God, what was he doing? England wasn't like that. He wasn't like Japan or Canada or even France. He couldn't just. But he had, and he had yet to pull out of it. He was embracing England. And England was rigid in his arms, stiff as a board, and America could practically feel the heat emanating off his face. He expected him to shove him away, push against America's chest and call him any number of names. In contrast, he just didn't move, and that confused America even more. Let go, let go, let go. Instead, America rubbed one of his hands down across his back, and England responded by stiffening further under his touch. His sandy blonde hair was soft under his chin, choppy and tousled as if he'd just woken up. America speculated that England's hair was just like that naturally. In America's arms, England was smaller frame and lighter figure, even more so than he'd assumed England to be from just looking at him. But he didn't feel weak. Frail would be the last word he'd use to describe the man. There was a deep strength, both physical and mental, palpable in the way his body felt and the manner in which he held himself, taut muscles and a proud posture. America finally willed himself to pull away, and the scent of England, something like the crisp bright sky combined with tea, lingered. What are you? England began, still flushed. They were still so close, and England's vivid green eyes were wide and his thick eyebrows were furrowed, and America contemplated that perhaps France was wrong and those eyebrows were actually rather. I am glad you're okay, America interrupted both England's words and his own train of thought, rubbing the back of his head. Course I'm okay, you tosser. Now what exactly was that about? He crossed his arms over his chest and looked away, toward the expanse of ocean beyond the dock. I dunno, America answered quietly, then laughed. I guess I was just trying to share with you some of my awesome. I mean, I've got a lot to spare, sir. Oh, shut up. Silence fell between the two, America attempting to pay more attention to the slushing of the water against the deck and the seabirds crying overhead than to England. England's arms were still crossed over his chest, and it was then that America noticed the book he held in one hand. So everyone is having a beach party and you're out here by yourself reading a book. I see no problem with that. They are doing what they consider fun and relaxing, and I'm doing what I enjoy. England clenched the book in what America realized was his still bandaged hand. America shrugged. How's your hand holding up? England slid the book under his arm and held out his hand, rubbing his fingers across the bandages that still covered it. Quite well. Wind isn't half as deep now, and the pain is minimal. America grinned. See? I told you I knew what I was doing, huh? He huffed. Well, shouldn't you be more concerned with someone else? Huh? America blinked, confused. The reason you came here, you dolt, England clarified. Oh. America smacked his forehead. Way to forget the excuse you gave England. Will Romano looked pretty okay. I mean, he was giving Spain Sandbrudzen. England rolled his eyes. He's healing well, yes. He chanced to glance at the shore. Pressure was up from his chair and was assisting Romano in his conquest of the sleeping Spain. As you can see, Pressure is also healing nicely. America rocked back and forth on his feet, the wood creaking beneath his boots. So, how are the repairs going? Brilliantly, really. We might actually be able to leave this island sooner than we'd planned, England explained. Oh yeah. You should introduce me to your friend, America requested. England nodded and blushed scarlet when America snatched his arm and started pulling him along the dock and back to the beach. He wrenched his arm out of America's grasp and huffed, stomping ahead of him. Honestly, he grumbled, stepping onto the hot sand and waving in the direction of the man repairing his ship. Hello, Australia. England jogged over and stood next to him, America following. Hello, mate. He pushed himself onto his feet, dusting sand off his khaki shorts. Almost got this piece ready. I'll start on the sails tomorrow. Australia's mouth turned up in a grin when he spotted America. So this is the famous Captain Jones. Criminy, you really are a military bloke. I almost thought England was joking about that. So this is your island? America inquired, eyes scanning from the lush vegetation beyond the beach to the bits of ocean he saw out his peripheral vision. Lie Island. Not many people know about it, and for good reason. He put his finger to his lips in a gesture of mock silence. I'd hate for someone to take it from me after all. There are so many islands in the Pardee Sea that you can't find on any map, so I figured since this one wasn't, it was mine for the nicking. Got a boat and my own plane, so I can come and go as I please. That sounds nice, America replied, because truly it did. It's the best. He stretched and yawned. Feeling a bit knackered though, so I'm going to grab a bit of shut-eye, all right. Get your rest in, England replied, nodding. Great then. Ta. He clamped a hand down on England's shoulder. And I'll come out and make some dinner after that. Oh, don't concern yourself with that. I can cook. Australia grimaced. No, it's no problem. I thought we'd have a cookout on the beach tonight, since we have company. He jerked his head to America with a wink. Well, he's not. A barbecue. Awesome. America interrupted excitedly. Never mind then, I suppose he'll be staying. England suppressed a small smile. Right. Later then. Australia waved goodbye and walked away toward a large hut visible at the edge of the tropical foliage. England raised an eyebrow. So, I imagine you wish to join the others in their beach party, then. America surveyed the Victoria Crow. Switzerland was now helping his sister build a sandcastle. Pressure was back in his chair, having somehow garnered himself another glass of beer. Spain was still out, and the sand that was covering him was looking more inappropriate than ever. Sealand was wading in a small pool of water near the shore. Nah, America replied. Looks pretty fun, but what? Dunno. America crossed his arms and glanced down at the sandy beach. Why don't we, You wanted to see how the repairs were going, did you not? America nodded. I'm going back to the ship then, I can show you if you'd like. America's face brightened. Why, yeah, that would be cool. You could even give me a tour or something. A tour? Hey, a military man's gotta understand their enemy. America shot him a cheeky grin. So you should show me how exactly you all live your life of crime. England scoffed. And I suppose after that, you'll give me a tour of your base. I can see how you live your life full of justice and heroism and all that wash. America nodded. Please, like you'd want to come to the base. Not in a million years, England quipped. But all right. Come with me then. And this is our Jolly Roger, although perhaps you've noticed that by now. England picked up the flag, folded neatly beside the mast because Australia was going to be working on the sail soon. It was the crest from the blanket and from the galley, the one America had speculated about being the Jolly Roger. A unicorn, America laughed. There's a lion too, England snapped. Honestly, I don't see what is so funny about unicorns. They are noble beasts. Yeah, if you're a fair maiden or whatever, he teased. England frowned and folded the flag back up. It's been the symbol of the Taliesin since the beginning. Respect it or get back in your plane and leave. England's voice had taken on that frigid, serious tone, the one that popped up any time America said something that for some indiscernible reason upset him greatly. All right. Geez, England. America held his arms out in front of him. England glared at the other man. That's enough here then. Why don't I show you below deck? You've seen the galley, but there's loads more. Sounds cool. He poked up, following England down the stairs that led below deck. Switzerland's room will be the first, he began. He and Liechtenstein have been on the crew for a few years. I couldn't turn him down when he offered his services, crazy as he is. He's pretty damn good, America agreed. England pushed open the gunner's door, and the first thing America's eyes met with was a very large rack of artillery, covering almost the entire back wall. No surprise there, that's artware. Outside the weaponry, the room was minimalistic. Switzerland didn't seem to have many possessions, and the bedding and furniture was as basic as the cabin America had stayed in. As you can see by the simplicity of the room, Switzerland sells most of his loot first to take care of Liechtenstein, then to buy more weaponry. England shut the cabin door. Is that all his stuff? Guns? No, that's only about a fifth of them. America gaped and shook his head. Hey, what about Liechtenstein? What's a sweet girl like her doing living on a pirate ship? England leveled him a look. You'll discover that many of us pirates are parentless, and some of us end up in this occupation due to necessity. A pirate ship may not seem safe to you, but I assure you there's no safer place for her than to be under her brother's guardianship. And Sealand? England chortled lightly. A stowaway at first, but we let him stay because there was simply nowhere else for him to go. He can be useful when he's not being a right brat. He paused. Oh, here's Prussia's room. England popped open the door and America peeked inside. Badass was the first thing that came to mind, and he said it out loud. Black and gold silks covered the bed, and the furniture was all varying shades of dark and glossy and detailed with engravings and carvings and even filigree. Against one wall was a rack of blades, gorgeous and elaborate and just dangerous, such as America had never seen. You'd think he was the captain, the way he decorates his room as if he were a king, England sighed. But he can do what he wants with his share, there's no reason for me to stop him. Pressure is... I don't know much about Prussia, to be honest. There is a bit of an understanding between us, he explained. He doesn't ask about me and I don't ask about him. Is it because he has some terrible and unheroic criminal past? America queried. England bristled and stiffened, chill seeping back into his voice. Not at all. I think it's because there's something in his past that hurt, something he wishes to forget. He paused, and I see no reason not to respect that. Oh. America thought England looked far away, as if he were reflecting on something clandestine that he would never allow him to be privy to. And this was what America wanted to know. He enjoyed finding out about England's pirates, the eccentric members of the Victoria crew who he found amusing and, despite Prussia's taunts, oddly likable. But it wasn't them he wanted to discover everything about. It was England, and that was the cabin door that he didn't expect him to open for him. America knew he'd continue to accidentally say things that set something off within England, something that caused him to grow cold and distant and often genuinely infuriated. And he wanted to know, damn it, why that happened, and who England was and why he was. England, the unpirate captain who lied about his age and protected everyone close to him as if they were an extension of himself and loved his ship as if it contained everything that had ever been dear to him. But he wouldn't be allowed to see his room, and even more so he wouldn't be allowed to know his story. He gulped. Well, it was worth a shot. Can I see your cabin, England? Chapter 14. Not so different. No survivors. China leaned over the edge of his steamship, staring at the rows of oars that propelled it forward. The ship was being navigated through a field of ocean dotted with ice, and China frowned as it just barely darted a rather large, rather dangerous chunk of it. He wrapped his coat around himself further and rubbed his gloved hands together, blowing on them in an attempt to warm himself. "Hong Kong." "None at all," replied Hong Kong, his words echoing in the still of the frigid air. It would be enough of a surprise if someone were able to survive normally, let alone here. BNG-chan is, on average, the coldest place in the world, a new voice piped up, feet clattering across the deck as she approached the general. He swerved around to face his subordinate, a young woman who was holding her tight parka around her as wind whipped strands of dark hair into her flushed cheeks. "Welcome back, Taiwan," China noted her presence. "Unfortunately, that's true. Korea just radioed me and told me they didn't find anything either." "How many pirate crews have been down this last week?" Hong Kong inquired, placing his thickly gloved hands on the edge of the ship. "Two that we know of. The Nibiru and this crew, the Gaguria," China paused. "A merchant ship and one pleasure vessel," Taiwan finished. 10 civilians on a sky cruise from La Pole to Tsuru, blown right out of the sky. Hong Kong raised an eyebrow. "Collateral damage, from what we've been able to find out," China clarified with a frown. "It's worrisome," Taiwan replied, staring out across the frozen sea toward the ice shelf that could be made out kilometers away. "Very worrisome." Hong Kong cursed under his breath. "Is the military planning on taking action anytime soon, General Wen? I mean, outside sending out search parties and finding out information?" China bit his lip, immediately regretting the action as the freezing wind had chapped it. "I don't know." Hong Kong answered, his discomfort with the situation clear in his expression. "Oh, I meant to tell you. Back when we were at the Hetalia base this morning, Major Thailand gave me this message to deliver to you." He reached in his pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope, blank except for a seal, as every envelope containing private military protocol was required to be in the world military. China took it from his subordinate and turned away from Taiwan and Hong Kong, slipping the envelope open with one gloved finger. He skimmed it quickly inside, folding it neatly and placing it in the flap of his coat. "Can you tell us what it says at all?" Taiwan queried. He turned back to his two subordinates, a tentative, if obviously false, smile on his face. "Just that it appears as if it won't be long before the military does become involved on the battlefront as well." "Can I see your cabin, England?" England stiffened, his back to America. "You what?" He closed his eyes and shook his head. "Yeah, why do you want to?" "It's not that interesting, really." He glanced at America out of his peripheral vision as he shrugged. "So everyone else's? I mean, you haven't seen Liechtenstein and Sealine's rooms yet," England corrected. America was scratching the back of his head, a habit that England had noticed he engaged in quite often. "Yeah, well, I mean it's kind of," he paused. "I told you I had to know all about my enemy, right?" He laughed nervously. England exhaled deeply and a smile quirked up one side of his mouth. "I don't see the harm." "Huh, really?" England began to walk down the hallway and America followed him. "This room." He stopped in front of the cabin. His door was larger, more elaborate than that of his crewmates. He opened a thick, heavy wooden door and it creaked beneath his push. England briskly stepped into the room, leaving America outside to observe. The first thing America noticed, outside of the upholstery, all very green, and the size of the room, large, but practically so, was how little it resembled the kind of room he'd always envisioned a pirate captain having. Over in one corner should have been a large round table with several chairs, where the captain would sit with his crew for meetings. Maybe on the table there'd be an elaborate scope, golden instruments, and a few treasure maps. And he thought that England's room should have been at least 2 times bigger than it was. Not a room, but several rooms. But it was just one room and there was no table, just a desk. And only one chair. It was so private, and America thought this looked like a room that belonged to someone who preferred solitude. England cared about his crew, that America was certain of, but he had little trouble imagining him spending more of his free time down in this room than sharing in the upbeat attics of his crew. He frowned and wondered why the idea of England isolating himself, choosing to be alone, caused him to feel a tad gloomy. America stepped across the threshold into the room and continued surveying his surroundings. The cabin was also immaculately clean, not a stray speck of dust or a single item out of place. It was almost sterile. It's very clean, he finally managed. England cocked an eyebrow and slid into his chair, crossing his legs and resting his hands atop them. Is that a bad thing? No. I'll be honest, England suppressed a sardonic smile. I have a rather poor habit of losing things, so I try to keep things organized. At this, America grinned. Me too. He rested his hand on the edge of the desk. England blinked, focusing his gaze on the aviator. Oh? I lose crap all the time, America whined. My friends are always getting on my case about it. Luckily Japan keeps the hangar pretty clean. He's a neat freak. England absently ran a hand up and down his leg. You want to sit down? America nodded. Yeah, I think I will. England began to stand up, but America had a different idea. He plopped rather unceremoniously onto the edge of England's bed, the soft silk and down comforter bouncing beneath him. Oh well. I suppose that works as well. He laughed. I've never really told you about my unit, have I? No, but America considered that if he told him more about himself, he might be able to get England to open up more about his own story. No, I should. You know about France, of course. Unfortunately. Ha. Yeah, I know what you mean, America continued. Well, there's my cousin, Canada. He's shy and he can be a bit of a pushover, but he's an awesome mechanic. Canada's the only other person that I really trust my plane with. We've been really close since we were little, and people often mistake us for twins. You look alike. England propped his elbow on the desk, having turned his chair toward the bed. Yeah, a lot alike. He stretched his arms out behind him. Japan is a sergeant. He's from Tsuru and is a great pilot. Not as good as me, of course. Oh, of course not. England rolled his eyes. Hey. It's true. But he's damn good nonetheless. America shuffled his feet back and forth against the side of the bed. We are pretty much best friends. He's quiet and likes to study a lot, but is actually a lot of fun to hang around with. England's interest appeared to be mildly piqued by what America was telling him, but he had a feeling that sharing such information that wasn't deeply personal, wouldn't have much of an effect on him. America bit his lip. This is sort of a weird thing to say, but if there's anything you want to ask me about, you know, myself, go ahead. His cheeks pinked as he asked this, and he stared down at his still swinging feet. England's eyes grew wide and he opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out for a moment. Why are you offering? He finally asked. America shrugged. Just 'cause I mean if we are comrades, we should know things about each other. He still tricked a bit on the word comrades. America felt as if perhaps he was slightly manipulating him, and a tinge of guilt pulled at him for doing so. But he really wanted to know about England, no England. He'd allow him privy to personal things if it meant possibly getting him to open up to him. England gulped and nodded. Fair enough. He looked directly at America, his green eyes questioning. Then may I ask you why you joined the military? America's brows furrowed. Huh? He shifted slightly. It was an odd question, but in retrospect, he should have anticipated a question like this from him. He shook his head and baimed. To be a hero, of course. England huffed. That's not an answer, you idiot. Why not? America scowled. That's why I joined. More detail, at least, he demanded. You said I could ask you anything, and I assumed that promised a fair reply as well. He rubbed his forehead and sighed, reaching down with one hand to toy with the fob watch at his waist. Yeah, you're okay. America ran his fingers across the watch. It's never been a question for me what I was going to do when I grew up. His voice as he began was far quieter than usual, far more contemplative. My grandfather and my father, they were in the military, and that was important to me. He smiled, nostalgia gracing his mind. Told me old war stories all the time, which was awesome. You're speaking awfully quietly, England said. Oh, I can speak dash, but England had slid out of his chair and decided to sit down on the bed next to America. I can hear fine now. America smiled softly. But yeah, I mean it wasn't because I wanted to just do what the rest of the family did or anything, he continued. It was a lot more than that. I remember the first time I got to go up in the sky. It's my first real memory, to be honest. England nodded. Yes. I know what you mean. You? England leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I don't remember anything from before, really. The first clear memory I have is waking up aboard a ship, this ship, and experiencing the feel of the sky and... He smiled, wistful. It was... Like even then, I realized this was where I was meant to be, America finished. Why yes, exactly, England concurred. I know how that is. America grinned. Yeah. Yeah, I thought you might. But anyway, I want to be in the sky, America explained, and I want to help people. There's nothing all that complicated about why I joined the military. The medals are nice and the recognition is too. But that's not why. England's hand was near America's now, and it twitched, as if wishing to move those couple centimeters further to reach it. His face grew hot and he willed himself to pull away. Don't be daft. Don't touch him. You. That worked for an answer. He nodded. Yes. Awesome. He gave England a thumbs up and then lowered his hand, placing it beside him. It landed soundly on top of England's hand. A hot, scarlet flush brightened his cheeks as he registered America's contact. He braved glancing down at America's hand, so casually resting on top of his. England hadn't had the courage to do it, but there was America, touching him like it was no difficult task. Like the hug earlier, America had wrapped his arms around him and all he'd been able to do was stand there, scared stiff. Perhaps America was just the touchy-feely type. Maybe he didn't have trouble with it, because his actions didn't mean anything special. And not that mine would mean anything either, if I did it, of course. He looked up, despite the fact that he knew his face was still hot, to meet America's bright blue eyes. They were like the sky, and he was struck by how so much about America reminded him of the sky, wide and shining and free. And his hands were calloused, strong, and sturdy, much like England's own. "We're not so different, are we?" The room was so silent, the only sound being England's heartbeat hammering in his ears and their quiet breathing. As if to test the waters, did America even realize what he was doing? Honestly, England shifted his hand slightly underneath the other man's. And America bolted away, his cheeks reddened and he shook his hand out as if he'd just touched a hot coal. England did the same, immediately tucking his arms across his chest afterward. America had darted the other direction so haphazardly that his legs thumped against the side of the bed with a loud bang. "Ow, damn," he cursed, reaching down to rub the back of his knees. Upon doing so, America's eyes caught the edge of an object peeking out from under the bed. It hadn't been there before. He imagined that his accidental assault on the bed had caused it to roll out. He snatched it up and turned it in his hands. It was a small scope, golden and intricate, and studded along the top rim with what America assumed to be emeralds. This was the kind of treasure he expected to see laying around in the headquarters of a pirate captain. He sat back up and held the scope up over his eye, pretending to look out over the sky with it. "Well, did you steal this?" America couldn't miss the way England's eyes flashed when he saw what the other man was holding, nor could he miss the rueful expression that crossed his face and the way his lips tightened into a thin line. "Oh, this is one of those situations." "Just kidding." America rectified. "I mean, I'm sure it's yours honestly, right?" "I didn't mean to." "It's not mine," England interrupted. His voice now was quiet, and it contained a strange combination of coldness and vulnerability. America gulped. He took England's hands and placed the scope in them, a hesitant smile on his face. "Here you go then." England clenched his hands around the scope and held it to his chest. "I'd been looking for this, actually." "So, thank you." "Is it?" "Just ask, damn it." "Is it important?" England closed his eyes and nodded. "It is." He sighed. It belonged to the previous captain and he... England shook his head roughly. "Never mind. Don't get me wrong, it's not as if I'm going to prattle onto you about my ship or my past or my captain. You know enough. Now don't ask again." America blinked. "I didn't really ask you." And he just stared at England, watched as he clutched the scope close to his heart, as if protecting something so precious, which is exactly what it was. The first clear memory I have is waking up aboard a ship, this ship, and experiencing the feel of the sky. He had that and the captain, the one who was gone, and then England, who had become the Victoria's captain at only 15, taking over from that previous captain. Those were the pieces he had, and the puzzle was at least starting to come together. How long have you been on this ship, England? Has this really been your entire life? He reached forward and placed a hand on England's shoulder. It was something he'd do to any friend, really. If they were feeling down, a touch of his awesome would be guaranteed to cheer them up. And England, well, he seemed rather piteous at the moment. America moved his other arm up as well, a hand on each shoulder. This, like the hug, felt different. England's eyes grew large and his face contorted in embarrassment as his cheeks flooded with red once more. What are you? The door slammed open with a bang and America scrambled away from England, nearly falling onto the floor as he did so. England, for his part, leaned up against the headboard, his hand over his heart as if willing the palpitations to slow down. Pressure was standing before them, hands on his hips and the most devilish of smirks on his lips. Damn it, Pressure of all people. Walking in on them sitting on the bed together, America's hands on England's shoulders and, well, England had looked so strangely flustered. It had to have looked pretty bad. You know, you two, Pressure began, I think that I'm actually not going to say anything. He laughed. Because this is just too easy even for me. Somehow that was even more embarrassing to him than the innuendo-laced boy toy comment America had been expecting. His cheeks burned. Belt up, Pressure. England snapped. Do you have any idea how much time you've accumulated on the mast? Don't think you're off the hook because you're injured. When you're better I'll... Yeah, Pressure snorted. Anyway, dinner's ready, lovebirds. He went and left the room. America stood up from the bed and brushed his legs off. Sorry about that, he murmured. About what? England queried, sliding off the bed and placing the scope in a desk drawer. I mean what Pressure walked in on. It's just... I saw you were down and you know. He scratched the back of his head. England raised an eyebrow. America laughed nervously. I didn't mean anything by it, he clarified in a tone that he hoped sounded reassuring. Oh, I see. England shut the drawer and frowned, his eyes downcast. He sighed. Of course not, his voice lowered in timbre, almost a whisper by the time he finished. Now let's go to dinner. I'm sure you'll enjoy it more than being cooped up in this bedroom with me, he bit off the last part of the statement. America rubbed his forehead and blinked, nonplussed. England had sounded so dejected, disappointed, disheartened even. England, what did I do wrong now? Chapter 15. Heroes aren't afraid of ghosts. The last thing England expected when he returned to the beachfront was to be nearly knocked over, breath momentarily leaving him as a ball came out of nowhere to hit him soundly in the stomach. Then again, it was not every day that the crew of the Victoria played dodgeball either. And that was exactly what greeted America and England when they stepped back onto the beach. Well, that and the unexpected smack in the abdomen. He could hear America's stifling laughter and he grumbled. Now who the hell threw that? England clenched the ball between his hands and stomped toward his crew. Spain and Romano were on one side of a line drawn in the sand, and Switzerland and Liechtenstein were on the other. Sealand stood near the shore in a sulk, apparently having been knocked out of the game. I'm really sorry, Captain. Liechtenstein flushed and looked to her bare feet, twiddling her toes in the sand. America laughed out loud now, and England shoved him in the arm. Shut up. She's Switzerland's sister. Are you really surprised her arm is that good? The mighty Captain Copeland, America quipped, mocked dramatically, taken out by a preteen girl. England HMMPHED and rolled his eyes, then smiled softly at Liechtenstein. Don't worry about it. Just make sure to aim for America next time instead of me. Well, I wasn't aiming for either of you, she replied, pulling at the fabric of her swimsuit, embarrassed. Then aim for Pressure. Pressure's out, Switzerland finally spoke, and he was smirking. England averted his eyes over to further down the beach, where Pressure was assisting Australia in last-minute meal preparations. First one to get out, actually. I imagine you made sure of that, Switzerland, England said. Switzerland just shrugged. That's why we sent him after you too, because he was already done with the game. Switzerland cheated. Prussia yelled from where he was standing next to Australia. He totally had it out for me. Aiming at my target and hitting it does not constitute cheating, he snapped back, gritting his teeth. But did you have to hit me in the face? You're injured. I knew hitting you there wouldn't affect your wounds. Lame excuse, Switzerland. England sighed and rubbed his forehead, then cursed inwardly that Switzerland just had to knock Prussia out so early. If he hadn't, perhaps he wouldn't have interrupted him and America and... His cheeks grew hot. Never mind, it was good that he did. America had said himself that his actions didn't mean anything after all. And the idea of doing something that meant nothing with America left him feeling hollow and just a little bit queasy. England shifted his eyes to America, who was still standing next to him, then quickly flitted them back away. He had been imagining the other man's actions to be something they weren't. America embracing him, America's hand on his, America holding his shoulders. America shifting his hold on England's shoulders, his blue eyes flickering behind the frames of his glasses and then leaning forward and... He clenched his eyes shut, scarlet flash spreading across the rest of his face. That hadn't happened. Where had that even come from? Shaking his head, he glanced beside him again, but America wasn't there. In the moments England had been caught up in his reverie, America had slipped away and was now chatting animatedly with Australia and Prussia. What in the blazes is wrong with me? He walked over to Australia, observing the recommenced dodgeball game on the way. Romano was out now, and it was just Spain versus Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Prussia had just left Australia's side and was now cheering Spain on, although England knew it was only a matter of time before Switzerland gained his victory. Australia gave him a wave and a greeting as he approached. England nodded in return. The other man was flipping patties of grilled meat onto a large plate. The fire pit he cooked over was scorching and the flames rose high, and England kept his distance, not liking the heat combined with the already substantial sweltering weather provided by the tropical climate. Around the fire pit were several logs, and that's where they sat and ate every night on the island. This is cool, America said, relaxing on one of the logs with a glass of juice in hand. It's kind of like camping. Australia grinned. Glad you're having fun, mate. America watched the crackling fire. We should have s'mores. England scoffed. For Christ's sake, America, we are on a remote island in there. Actually, I've got a Dutch oven I can cook up some cobbler in, but no marshmallows, sorry, Australia chuckled. He went back to his cooking. America tentatively patted the log next to him and gestured toward England. Sit down. England poured himself a glass of juice from atop the small table Australia had set up and slid down onto the log next to America. What? It's nothing. America shrugged, sipping his drink absently. Just figured you'd stand over there by yourself until someone invited you to sit down with them. Is that a problem? England furrowed his eyebrows. America glanced down to the glass in his hands. No, it's a nine to have to look over and see you all pissy and sulky over there. I wasn't pissy. I also America's voice lowered and he stirred his drink with his finger. I kind of thought that you seemed to spend a lot of time alone, don't you? Well, yes, but... England bit his lip. But don't misunderstand. It's by choice that I do that. I figured as much. Well then, what does it matter? America sighed. He averted his eyes to the sky, and so did England. The sun was beginning to set on the island, golden yellows melting into deep orange and bright crimson, all reflected upon the surface of the almost unbelievably blue ocean. I dunno. It just kind of bugs me. Oh, I see. He felt a tap on his back and swiftly turned around to see Australia smiling down at him. Food's ready, England. Right then. England shook his head and pushed himself off the log, coaxing America to join him and serving himself a plate of food from the small table. America followed and did the same. Australia yelled at the rest of the crew to come over, and they flocked to the table behind America and England. Dinner was a rowdy affair, as usual with the crew of the Victoria. Prussia vociferously told stories, Switzerland snapped at him, Romano yelled anytime Spain looked at him funny, Sealand was cheeky, Liechtenstein was giggly, Australia was boisterous, and America also laughed and contributed quite often. England was quiet though, concentrating on the food on his plate as opposed to America sitting right next to him. He found that it was probably in his best interest to think of everything but America. But a thought did strike him, and he turned to ask him a question. America? Do you need to radio the base? You forgot last time, sir. Nah, America replied, waving the query away with his hand. They know I won't be back tonight. At this England's eyes widened. What? America flushed and scratched the back of his head. I mean, it's a long journey, and I can't exactly head back tonight, sir. You planning on staying? He dared to ask. America let out a nervous laugh. Don't worry, I have a duffel bag of stuff, so it's no big deal. I had one with me from a previous mission, yeah. Of course, England agreed, although he found America's argument unconvincing. Well, there's a cabin on the ship for you, as you know. America grinned, slightly lopsided, very adorable. England berated himself for that addition. He looked away with a blush, instead focusing his eyes on the ocean. By now the sun had set, although the moon and the fire provided plenty of light. The tide had risen, taking Switzerland and Liechtenstein's sandcastle with it as the waters lapped gently against the beach. With the other man beside him, despite the ruckus provided by the rest of the crew, he felt peaceful. It was strange. Awesome, America finally replied. England realized that everyone else had long since finished their meals, the plates piled high on the table. He was the only one who still idly picked at it. He took a few bites to finish it off, then walked over to place it on the table, rejoining America after he did so. After everyone had enjoyed a plate of the cobbler Australia had promised, he motioned everyone to be quiet and moved his own log closer to the fire, prodding it with a large stick. Right, mates, thought we might continue this party. With alcohol. Prussia quipped. You know where I keep the beer, Australia chortled. Feel free to break it out. Prussia and Spain returned, holding a large bucket of ice filled with beer bottles, less than a minute later. Didn't waste time, you two. Spain began passing them around, ignoring Sealand's request for one and snatching him a bottle of soda instead. So what are we doing? Spain inquired as he sat back down, all of the adults now provided with a drink. I've got a tale to tell. Thought the kids might enjoy a good scary story, Australia began, and the firelight flickered over his face rather appropriately. Next to England, America stiffened noticeably. Awesome idea. America stuttered, which bewildered England. I'm a hero, so bring it on. Easy on, America, Australia countered. Anyway, this one is about the deaf birds and that live on this very island. Deaf birds? America bit his lip, fear flashing in his eyes. England gave him a reproachful look. Surely he was jesting, the story hadn't even begun. But he did recall the first night he'd met America. Oh good. I was so afraid you were a ghost. Well, that whole scene made a lot more sense to him now. You can hear them crying right now, really. Australia pointed to the forest, from which indeed, a rather mournful chorus of bird calls emitted. And every night, they're out. There's hundreds of them on this island. England felt pressure on his arm and looked down to see that America had grasped it. Honestly, he chided. America just looked at him, a sheepish smile on his face. Well, they are not just birds, they are messengers, Australia continued. Those aren't bird calls you're hearing, they are cries. And every time one of them cries it means someone has... America jumped and clung onto England tighter, now burying his face in his shoulder. The rest of the crew just blinked. You joking, right? Prussia snickered. Shut up, it's scary. America argued feebly. England really tried his damnedest to shove America off in frustration, but the truth was that the hitherto almost fearless man clinging to him as if it were the end of the world, over a silly ghost story no less, was almost endearing. And he knew his face must have been red as a beet at America's close contact. He looked pitiful, his eyes wide and his glasses askew from crashing into England. His mouth had formed into a perpetual pout. Going on then. Australia chuckled. Well, yes, when one of them cries it means someone has died. America made a noise again, which Australia ignored. But here's what makes it really frightening. His eyes flickered in the firelight. These birds don't just go crying about because someone has died. He paused. They make that noise because the souls of the dead possess the birds before passing on to the next world. And for just a moment, Australia held up his finger. The dead suffer one more cry of pain, such pain, can you hear it now? Another bird called. Not something I'm looking forward to when I die, mind you. America was now holding on to England so tightly that he was concerned about the circulation in his arm. When another bird's call came from the forest, his grip only strengthened. That's lame, Sealand said, and Liechtenstein shyly nodded in agreement. Ha! I bet you'll all have nightmares tonight, America argued, his voice shaking. Highly doubt it, Romano snorted. Just you watch, he protested. If a hero is scared by this story, then you all must be terrified. I can tell another one. Australia cocked an eyebrow. Possibly not the best idea, England replied. America was against his shoulder, shaking his head in the negative. He rolled his eyes, but unthinkingly, he stroked his hand through America's hair. America required that England accompany him to his plane in order to retrieve his duffel bag, which he grasped about, but did nonetheless. And with every step and every noise, a wave crashing against the shore, the breaking of a twig, the rustling of leaves, America would flinch, squeak, or jump. It was absolutely ridiculous. How can a trained military captain be so scared of a meager ghost story? England asked as they walked back to the ship for the night, America's duffel bag slung over his own back. He considered that perhaps the other man was faking it, but if he were, he was a damn good actor. And well, he had expressed fear of ghosts the first night they'd met. When they'd gone to retrieve the bag together, Prussia, who was downing beers with Spain, had quipped that he'd done it to get closer to England. Embarrassing, but not surprising, come in from Prussia. America frowned. It was really scary. They boarded the ship. I have to admit, I'm astonished, England said. America cocked his head at him. I mean, you act like you aren't afraid of anything, to the point of being extremely stupid. America shuffled his feet back and forth on the deck. I'm afraid of things. No. Then what's the big deal? England sighed. It's more that you're actually showing it, and in such an extravagant manner. America shrugged. Scary stories are my weakness, I guess. He grinned weakly. Even someone as great as I am has one of those. England actually chuckled at this. You preposterous, you know. America was still jumping at every sudden sound, and England could hear Prussia and Spain on the beach, loudly singing, the drunken songs having little to no lyrical or rhythmic coherency. Silence lapsed, and England noticed that America had stopped walking. Hey England, he finally spoke. Yes? Can you And his cheeks were redder than England had ever seen them. Would you mind staying in my bedroom until I fall asleep? What? England's green eyes grew large and he flushed. What are you implying? America blinked, oblivious. I just know I won't be able to get to sleep. Every time I get scared, I just sit in bed staring at shadows and... All right, England agreed. If you're pathetic enough to need that, there's no real reason for me not to do it. He frowned. Not pathetic. He'd started walking again, and now they were making their way down the stairs into the lower ship. How is that not pathetic? America gritted his teeth at that. What's worse, wanting someone by your side as you go to sleep, or isolating yourself from everyone all the time? England blinked, taken aback. He was surprised that America, in his panicked state, had managed something so sensical. He pushed open the door to the cabin the pilot would be staying in. It's not at all true that the two situations are alike. America towed off his shoes and plopped down onto the bed, slipping the covers over him and nuzzling into the pillow. He threw his duffel bag onto the floor. You must be tired. He nodded and patted a free space on the edge of the bed. Well, I was going to sit in a chair, but... America yawned. You're not allowed to leave until I'm definitely asleep. All right. This was insane, England thought. But America, who had just removed his glasses and placed them on the night table, who was now rubbing his eyes and then tucking the comforter up underneath his chin, was difficult to resist. He'd already accepted that he thought America was attractive, but he now was having to come to terms, and had been for the entire evening, with how strangely endearing he was. He glanced warmly at America, secretly hoping that the other man would see the gentle way in which he looked at him. But he was already asleep. England's presence alone apparently was enough. Asleep, he looked naive, vulnerable, and young, the bravado that sustained him when he was conscious stripped away. It was like seeing inside him, seeing who he really was. Tenderly, with a feather-like touch, he stroked America's cheek. He watched him, not once moving to leave, ignoring the way his eyelids grew heavy with sleep. He felt something surge up within him, bubbling to the surface, no matter how hard he tried to push it down. And at that moment, America's peaceful face contorted into something else, a frown, and his eyes clenched shut, and he made a noise, obviously one of fear. A nightmare. Then he reached up, grabbing for whatever was closest. It was England, who was rather unceremoniously yanked down into the bed with America. He struggled to pull away, but the other man's grip on him was firm. America's arms were wrapped around his center, and his face was nuzzling his back. "Hey, America, I can't." His cheeks bloomed scarlet. "Stay," America murmured against his back, and England wasn't sure if the other man was asleep or awake. "Don't leave. It's dark, and I hate being alone." He must have been asleep, but England didn't have the heart to try and pull out of his arms again. It was pitiful and all a bit tragic, the hero's weak point, and he found that it just made him grow fonder of him. England relaxed, running his hands over America's and speaking in a soothing voice. "I won't leave you, America. I'll stay here tonight." He felt America nod, and England listened to the rhythm of his breathing, the soft puffs of air against his back being the only sound in the room outside his own breaths. It was a soothing noise, an unfamiliar noise, his own breathing in tandem with another person's. Someone else's arms encircling him, holding him because England's presence was what they needed. "Thanks." America loosened his grip, but still held the other man. "Thanks, England." And that something that was bubbling to the surface within England burst. It was mad really, and he hadn't the slightest idea if he even had a chance, but England realized that perhaps he was rather in love with America. He groaned. Pressure had been right all along. Chapter 16. Cute for a pirate. When America had woken up with his arms around England, he'd nearly leapt off the bed in shock. It was the side of his sleeping face, illuminated by the morning sun peeking through the porthole, that stopped him. England slept peacefully, the dull hum of his breathing entering America's ears. He ran his eyes down the other man's face, finding it difficult to look away. His lips were slightly parted, and America noticed the wound from the Cosmoda attack on his cheek. It was pale pink, almost healed. He appeared content, and America found that a warmth in his chest erupted at seeing him like this. It was as if he were witness to something private, a part of England that not many were allowed to see. Or at least, he assumed. He couldn't imagine that England slept freely in front of many people. Sandy blonde hair splayed out behind England on the pillar, and his choppy bangs dusted his forehead. Unthinkingly, he reached forward and sifted his fingers through England's bangs. Below that were his eyebrows, and America grinned a little upon seeing them. They were pretty hard to miss, so it made sense that France walked away from his encounters with England, remembering them so vividly. But in contrast to France's impression, America found that he thought they were well, sort of cute. Absently, his fingers moved from his bangs to his thick dark brows, and he chuckled to himself as he noted that they were slightly furrowed, even in his sleep. England had slept with him the previous night. He didn't recall pulling England into bed with him, but knowing himself, he wasn't that surprised that he'd done so. Canada and Japan had been victims of his ghost story phobia more than once, and had ended up innocently sharing a bunk with him some of those evenings. But it was that England had accepted, that England hadn't shoved him off and stormed to his own cabin, that shocked him. Those weren't the actions of a comrade, but the actions of something more. A close friend, at least. And he really liked that. Somewhere along the line, it had ceased mattering much to America that England was a pirate. There were times in which he'd forget that he was one entirely. England was England. It was as simple as that. "What the hell are you doing?" a voice snapped him out of his thoughts. He looked down to see England staring at him, green eyes blearily opening. America pulled his fingers away from Inland's face swift as he could manage, and he backed up against the wall and turned his face away in attempt to hide his inevitably red face. He'd been caught with his fingers on Inland's eyebrows. How embarrassing firstly, and also how weird must Inland think in. "I'm watching you." "Touching me like that," he huffed, sitting up and stifling a rather large yawn. "I thought you didn't like the way I looked." "You've said so that time we were in the kitchen." Inland crossed his arms, his cheeks now lightly flushed. What? "I didn't say that." America's eyes grew wide and he shook his head in the negative, gesturing wildly with his hands in front of him. "You sort of did." "Well then I didn't mean it," he murmured, his voice almost indiscernible. He was face to face with Inland now, having turned back when he'd shaken his head. And Inland's face exploded, red as a cherry tomato. America had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. His face was bright as crimson and his eyes were so wide and his eyebrows had shot up into his forehead. Let's go to breakfast," Inland finally stammered. He was glancing away from America, slightly downcast as if he were unable to make eye contact with him. There was a pitiful excuse for a pout on his lips, a sure attempt to hide the fact that he was pleased by America's admission. And America smiled to himself. He couldn't deny that actually, Inland was pretty damn cute on the whole. For a pirate. Australia cooked up a delicious breakfast, scrambled eggs, greasy sausages, crispy bacon, and pancakes with plenty of syrup to slather all over them. That made up for the awkward atmosphere on the beach that morning at least somewhat. Or at least, awkward for him. He should have known that everyone would know Inland had slept in his room. It would have only taken one person peeking into his cabin to discover it, and judging by the way Prussia snickered at him every time their eyes met, Spain gave him this knowing smile, and Switzerland glared at him, there was simply no doubt they knew. Inland, who sat next to him, was no doubt receiving the same treatment. Prussia and Spain were both suffering from mild hangovers, so they weren't as talkative as the night before. Australia gave them both drinks he'd mixed up to help them get over the effects, because as he said, "We'll have lots of work to do today, mates." Romano yawned beside Spain, unthinkingly leaning his head on the other man's shoulder. This earned a warm smile from Spain. America tapped his chin in thought and stood up, walking over to Romano with an earnest grin. "You done eating, Romano?" he inquired. "Do you see a plate?" he grumbled in return, a sour expression on his face. America blinked. Romano had indeed already thrown his dirty plate onto the table. "Oh right. Then can I talk to YA?" Romano's brows creased in confusion at this, but he nodded. "Yeah, sure. Don't see why not. I mean, sorry to interrupt you in Spain, but..." He blushed hotly and shoved Spain away, pushing himself off the log and standing up. Romano clenched a fist and shouted, "You're not interrupting me. I just kind of fell onto that jerk Spain because I was tired. It's good you came because now he can't take advantage of me." America glanced to Spain, who sighed and rubbed his hand down his face. He gestured America to go on with his free hand. "Okay." He shrugged. "Follow me then, Romano." They walked together wordlessly to the far edge of the beach, closest to the landing pad. America stopped and Romano did the same. "I kind of want to talk to you about your brother," he began. Romano stiffened. "What of him?" "It's nothing bad." America placed his hands in front of him. Romano relaxed, relieved. "Your brother was the same. When I mentioned you, he immediately acted as if something bad must have happened. Well, you can't blame us." Romano crossed his arms. "It's pretty shitty out there right now. Anyway, how do you know Veneziano?" "Oh. We went on a mission together. Actually it was..." America hesitated. The lack of results the mission had yielded still frustrating to him, to find out information about the Cosmida. "We didn't really find much. So what do you have to tell me?" "I told your brother about what happened with the Nubaru and the Cosmida and..." "You did?" Romano snapped. "You're mean, why not?" At this, the perpetually scowling Romano softened. I don't like to see him worry, okay?" "Makes sense." America sat on the edge of the flight pad, the concrete hot beneath him. He glanced over to the edge of the forest and made a note to take a hike before leaving. It was really beautiful. But I thought it was only fair, and have you really not seen each other for 6 months? Romano shrugged and sat down next to him. We really don't have many chances, but I tried to radio him at least. Couldn't he just fly in and see you? America asked, turning his feet inward. Veneziano's not a pilot, he replied shortly. It's not as easy for us as it is for you and Captain Kirkland. America flashed at the implication there, if there indeed even was one. Can I just tell you the same thing I told him? I guess. America took Romano's shoulders, merely tightening his hold when he began to pull away. He looked directly at him, blue eyes stern. Keep your brother close, okay? It's none of your dash. Radio him or whatever if you haven't already. And damn it, just make sure you see him. America continued. Romano nodded. CHH if you insist. Good. America baned. Romano frowned and slid off the landing pad. Thanks, he murmured. Huh? But he'd already started walking away. America watched him leave, heading back to the area of the beach Bane was occupying. He rested his chin on his hand and absently toyed with the fob watch that hung at his belt. The tropical sun burned, growing stronger as the morning lingered on. America reached down and slipped off his hot black boots and socks, rolling up his pants as well. He sifted his toes through the scorching sand, feeling rather like he'd like to take a dip in the cool ocean water. England had barely spoken to him since that humiliating moment in the cabin that morning. He didn't know if he'd upset England, the whole situation had embarrassed him, or just a combination of both. As much as he felt that he knew England so much better than he had before he'd visited this island, his emotions were still so often a mystery to him. He was unpredictable, hot and cold and all over the place. It was both amusing and a bit frustrating. America really wanted to understand England after all. He wasn't just not talking though, he avoided looking at him entirely. America had tried to shoot him tentative smiles at several points throughout breakfast, only for England to turn his face away and not acknowledge them. America bit his lip. I really should take a dip to clear my head. He was about to stand up when he felt a tap on his shoulder. Before America could even turn around, Pressure was sitting down next to him. Sup boy toy? America blushed. Well, I guess if I actually want to talk to you, I should call you by your name. Can you always call me by my name? America asked. Not making any promises, Pressure replied with a shrug. But I do kinda want to talk to you about England. He slapped his hand on America's arm. And I'm not taking no for an answer. America frowned. Yeah, that's what I thought. He grinned. Firstly, I want to say I'm actually sorry for walking in on you two yesterday. It was funny at the time, but I feel bad because you totally could have gotten somewhere, I bet, if I hadn't done that. And nothing was happening. America held his hands up and shook his head fervently. I didn't say anything was, Pressure countered. I said that something could have happened. America opened his mouth to speak again, but Pressure cut him off. I get enough denial from England, so just listen to me, okay man? America nodded. And I also know nothing happened between you two last night, much as it would have been awesome. Doesn't make you two sleeping together not funny, though. He was still smoking, and this just made the entire conversation even more humiliating. Pressure now moved his arm up and put it around America's shoulders in a friendly manner. But hey, you know what? I like you. You're a pretty cool guy. Course I am. America finally got in. And if England can get over the fact that you're military enough to trust you like he has, well damn, Pressure paused, who the hell am I to disagree with that? England can rely on me, that's all. We are comrades, America argued weakly. Pressure sighed. You really have no idea how big that is, do you? He leaned back on his hands and looked skyward. England would kill me for telling you this shit, but I'm going to anyway. Huh? I don't know how many times we've been at a bar together, and I'd spot a hot guy and point them out to England. A hot guy? Yeah, no shit, Pressure snorted. I thought that was obvious. He winked. And you're a guy, sir. Shut up. America snapped, cheeks red. Anyway, England pretends he's not interested. He's a captain, he has important work, and he doesn't have time to flirt about. Just the kind of excuses you'd expect from him. Pressure shifted, so he was now facing America. But me? I think he's just lonely and is afraid of stuff like that. So he is lonely. America mumbled, more to himself than anything else. We are all really close to England, Prussia replied, having obviously heard America's murmur. And so it's not like he doesn't have friends, 'cause he does. But there's still this kind of weird guard he keeps up. Yeah, tell me about it. Heh. Well, he's kind of different with you, Prussia paused. Good different. It's a pretty awesome thing to see, to be honest. I just want you to know that I'm rooting for you too, Anne. Me and England are friends, America interrupted. Do you blush when talking about friends all the time? Prussia rolled his eyes and America recalled France making a very similar comment. I mean, I know England's not bad looking, but that kind of reaction. He trailed off and waggled his eyebrows suggestively. He's pretty damn cute, America recalled the thought crossing his mind earlier when England was flustered and huffing and acting as if he was scandalized. The way that he acted so over the top like that was, yeah, he'd found him cute. England was nice to look at, okay, he'd admitted it to himself. He pouted and bit his lip. He could acknowledge when someone was good-looking, but it normally didn't make his face heat up to think about. But I just in the end wanted to apologize for what I did yesterday and wish you two luck because... He laughed. I really do want England to be happy, you know. He's my captain and my friend. And you're a pretty awesome, if unexpected, way for him to get that. Okay, was all America could manage, too caught up in his own thoughts to formulate much more of a reply. Awesome. Prussia smacked him on the back and stood up. I'm gonna go drink my mid-morning beer, now that my hangover's gone. Prussia walked away, leaving America alone on the edge of the flight pad again. He sifted his feet through the sand once more, thinking that swim in the Cerulean Sea was sounding even better than it had several minutes ago. He picked up his boots and tucked the socks inside, sliding off the ledge and brushing the rear of his pants off. He had a spare pair of pants, so it wouldn't be a problem to just swim in the ones he was wearing. He slid his belt and watch off and stuffed them in the boots as well. The water was gorgeous and he considered that perhaps he could swim out a bit more and take a peek at the coral reef. When he was descending in his plane, he could tell that it began only about 50 meters out from the shore. He made his way to the edge of the beach, enjoying the way the sand grew wetter, thus cooler, beneath his bare feet as he came closer to the surf. Temperate water lapped at his feet when he reached it, and he squished his feet into the sand, rippling his toes. It had been a while since he'd really had time to go to a beach. America deposited his boots where the sand was still dry and with a grin ran into the water and let the waves lap against his ankles, then his knees, his thighs and... America! Oh Dan, he cursed, turning around. But it was England calling his name, England waving at him from the beachfront. He felt his irritation add. At least he was talking to him. Yeah. America yelled back. Can you come ashore? I have some things I need to show you. Or, in the middle of my swimming, England. America shouted back, although he was making his way back to the beach as he did so. Well, it's important. I should do it while I'm thinking about it, England replied once America had stepped out of the surf. America noticed that England still wasn't making eye contact him, and he found it frustrating. Okay. It's in my cabin, come along then, he said crisply, a bit more distant than he'd been the previous day. America gulped as he walked alongside him to the ship. Hey England. What is it, America? Did I do something to upset you? He asked quietly. I mean, not that I probably did, but... No, it's nothing you did, America, England interrupted. At least, not directly, he added beneath his breath. Oh. Are you sure? Quite. Then what's got you down? America queried. Is it something to do with the Cosmoda? And England, knowing an excuse when he saw one, nodded. Yes, that's been bugging me today. That's actually why I need you to come to my cabin. I have some information. Oh, that's great. How did you manage to get that? He asked excitedly. I have a contact, a merchant. He has a contact within the Cosmoda that's leaking the information, England explained. Awesome. They continued walking to the ship, conversation between them having ceased completely. America noted with disappointment that it didn't make much sense for England to not look at him because he was upset about the Cosmoda. The first thing England pulled out from his desk drawer when they reached the cabin was a piece of paper, but before he did so, he forced America to make a promise. If you meet anyone on this list, you are not to hurt them. In your case, I imagine that would mean that you are not to turn them over to the military either. I suppose you could bring them to my ship if you caught one of them. We could keep them prisoner here. What dash? America blinked, reaching for the paper. England pulled it back. My source of information has a friend in the Cosmoda, and it's one of these people, England explained. My promise in exchange for the information was that I wouldn't harm that friend. But they are evil. Oh, shut up, England sighed. If he's giving this merchant information on the Cosmoda, he obviously doesn't want to be a part of it. America sat down on the edge of England's bed and looked down. Well then, why don't they leave? England rubbed his forehead in between his eyebrows. I imagine it's not that simple. You really are naive. Yeah, I hear that a lot, America grumbled. Only because it's true, England quipped. I haven't the foggiest why they remember, but I imagine they're staying around for the information or because. He lowered his voice, perhaps they're afraid to try and leave. America nodded. Okay, I promise. You do realize, England said, toying with the piece of paper between his fingers, that in order to keep that promise, you may have to defy the military. If you have a member of the Cosmoda and don't turn him or her in. His eyes widened. I'd get in a lot of trouble, I guess. Yes, I imagine you would, England sighed. Look, I'm not trying to force you to defy your superiors. It's fine if you don't want this paper. I'm sure us pirates can take care of things well enough without. Give it to me. He held his hand out. What? England's eyebrows shot up. America glanced away, staring at the headboard of the bed. People are dying. I can't worry about things like that. Then he grinned. Heroes fight for the good of the world, no matter what. At this, England did finally look at him, straight in the face. And he smiled, and America felt his heart quicken at that rare expression. You really are something, America. Hey, that's not dash. I don't mean that as an insult, England clarified. Not at all. England handed him the slip of paper, and America scrolled down the list of names. Alfraskaya, Belarus, Von Bock, Estonia. He continued reading, a list of 40 or so names, almost all at least vaguely Mevdian. And the last name on the list, Laurinaitis, Lithuania. Chapter 17. His champion. Beads of sweat trickled down England's brow, and he shielded it, the late morning sun burning bright on the deck of the ship. Australia couldn't manage repairing the sails by himself, so the Victoria crew had been recruited to assist him. England was more than willing. He'd offered to help Australia, but had been turned down and told to rest at several points before that morning. Prussia, Spain, Romano, Liechtenstein, and Sealand were mending the sails, needle and thread weaving back and forth through the sturdy material. Switzerland, who along with England was the only member of the Victoria crew that was both uninjured and an adult, was sitting atop the bow, hammer in hand and nails held in between his teeth as he repaired and replaced the splintered wood. Australia was lugging timber aboard the deck. England held one side of the long saw, the wood handle held tightly in one of his hands. His other hand, his injured hand, grasped it with far less force as it sawed through the thick lumber. Australia had suggested that they replace the back boom entirely as it has suffered substantial damage. That's what England was working on at the moment, and at the other end of the saw, moving in unison with him, was America. America's sleeves were rolled up to his shoulders, revealing his tanned arms and his smooth but still well-defined muscles. The sun had already dried his wet pants, and he'd retrieved his boots from the beach. His blue eyes shone behind the frames of his glasses, and England flashed when he ran one sweaty palm through his soft blonde hair. England flooded a bit at that, and it was made worse when America leveled him with a warm, but still cocksure, grin. If England wasn't certain of otherwise, he would swear the other man was flirting with him, or at the very least teasing him by attempting to make himself look as attractive as humanly possible and being rather successful at it. It would have been foolish for him to have ever denied that America was good-looking, ridiculously so, in fact. He had admitted that to himself long before now. But there was a substantial difference between acknowledging the mere fact that America was handsome and doing what he was doing now. Staring and taking in every detail of his physique as if he wished to commit it to memory. Doing this, it was new. England shook his head and averted his eyes down to the saw entirely, so all he could see now was America's hands he ached to take in his iron. Thanks, America's voice interrupted his musings. What? England asked, glancing halfway up. America let go of the saw, and he did so as well. America rubbed the nape of his neck. For the information. I mean, for trusting me with it and stuff. England's eyes widened and he looked away. After America had pocketed the list of ranked Cosmida members, he'd followed up by informing him of everything else Poland had told him. It's no problem. He felt a clap on his shoulder and started, for a moment expecting it to be America. But America was still standing across from him. He sighed to himself, frustrated at his own behavior. He looked up. Australia. You think your aviator friend can help me out with something? He asked, quirking an eyebrow. What is it? America walked over to stand by Australia's side. England blinked. America had been surprisingly willing to help out with the repairs of the ship. He speculated that he'd say no, giving the excuse that he can't help fix a pirate ship, but instead he'd agreed with a smile and a shrug and a simple sure, why not? You're pretty strong, right? Of course I am. America quipped confidently. Brilliant. I need someone to climb up the main mast to the gaffing. He pointed up amongst the wood of the ship. Take a hammer and a few nails and I'll tell you what to do when you get up there. I can take care of that, Australia. England cut in. America shook his head. Nah. It's okay, I can do it. Your hand's not healed after all, Anne. I mean, it's easy enough. England huffed and crossed his arms, thick eyebrows rising. You think climbing the blasted mast is easy? I assure you it requires quite a lot of strength to do it. America slapped a hand on his bare bicep and smirked, then, most maddening of all, he winked. I think I can handle it, Captain. England's face bloomed red. He thought that America must have been either completely oblivious to what he was doing to him, or totally aware. He scowled and turned away in embarrassment. America had no trouble climbing the mast, and he crowed his triumph upon reaching the point where the gaff met the mast. Wow. That was so hard, he yelled down. It's a good thing I'm strong, otherwise I definitely would have. Oh, shut the hell up. England shouted back, hands on his hips. America chuckled, loud enough that it could be heard down on the deck. England watched as Australia gave America specific instructions. He wanted the gas connection to the mast to be secured, as it had come loose during the battle with the Cosmida. America followed his instructions easily, but England was paying little attention to that. He really hated how striking America was, perched on the mast with the sun shining behind him and illuminating him to the point of glowing. That was, coupled with exuding his natural charisma, which could have just as easily been called his natural obnoxiousness. And then there was his rear, which England could see quite well from where he was standing. Well, that was undeniably a nice view. Since he'd woken up that morning, England's mind had been a jumbled mess. And it just got worse the more time he spent with America. He thought that perhaps, as he registered the first vestiges of consciousness in the morning, that he'd merely come to the conclusion that he was in love with America due to how fatigued he'd been the previous night. It made sense. Lack of sleep did funny things. But then he'd realized that America was touching him, stroking his face, his eyebrows, and the doubt had left his mind. It wasn't America's actions that had caused that, but his expression. In the quiet instant before he'd registered that England was awake, before England had spat at him in irritation, there had been something in America's face that had caused the same warmth to bubble to the surface and explode just as it had done before he'd slipped off into sleep the night before. England hadn't the foggiest idea what to do next. He could confront him point blank about it, but that would surely result in disaster. He could pursue America, court him, as old-fashioned as that sounded, flowers, moonlit walks, all the lot. England thought that he really must have been the biggest fool this side of the Pleiades. America was just about the last person who he should have allowed to slip into his heart like this. He was military. A blasted soldier. And had all his hatred and anger toward that meant nothing, when now, just one flash of America's almost ever-present smile caused him to practically forget that he was even part of that institution he so despised. He recalled less than an hour before, when America had looked at him with conviction as he demanded the cosmometer list, not a fleck of doubt in his expression. America had proven himself to England as a man of honor, and yes, a hero, even. He chuckled a bit at that. So all right, even though it made a part of him scream and protest, he could, perhaps, deal with America being a soldier. But there was still the fact that England was, well, a pirate, and he had no idea if America, on the ghost of a chance that he felt the same, could forgive that. So England decided that he could, and unfortunately to him this seemed like the best idea, merely do nothing and hope that the feelings ebbed, the fire died and cooled into just funness and friendship. He tried to convince himself that it would probably be better for his sanity if nothing happened between them. It's not like America would be interested anyway. Maybe there was nothing. Perhaps America would fly off in his plane and they'd not see each other again, or they'd team up against the cosmometer, and then once that was over with, America would go back to his aviation force base and never think of England again. He hated that idea the most. America was scooting down the mast now, and Australia called for a lunch break. Switzerland hopped off the bow, and the rest of the crew ceased their mending, jumping to their feet and heading to the beach. America was going to swim, and no one was going to interrupt him this time. The invigorating blue water, the color of paradise, beckoned him once more, and he slid out of his pants so he could swim in his boxers. His shirt joined his pants, his boots, his watch, his belt, and his socks by the beach, and he ran into the surf once more. Romano and Spain were sitting in the shallows, letting the cool water run across the pink-red burns on their bodies. Pressure was now joining them, the sea lapping at the wound on his back as he swallowed down a bottle of beer. America darted past them, splashing as he did so. He stopped when the water was up to his chest and slid his eyes shut, sinking down into the ocean so only his shoulders and head were visible. Being surrounded so closely by a reef, the waves were small, but he rode them anyway, bobbing up and down with their undulations. He dug his toes into the sand, wiggling them, then grinning at the feeling of a fish flicking his leg with a fin as it swam by. Awesome, he said to himself as he began to journey up further, intent on reaching the reef. The water was to his shoulders when he glanced back, and it wasn't the distance from the shore that caught his eye. He wasn't more than 20 meters out, but rather the dock. England was sitting on the end of it again, legs hanging over the side and feet dangling in the water. He could make out a book perched in England's hand, only barely. Is this what he does every day? America grumbled to himself, swimming back against the surf to the shore. Gauging the direction and distance he needed to reach the dock, he slipped underwater and swam toward England, popping up beside the dock and shaking his soaking blonde locks as he did so. England nearly dropped his book. Fucking hell, America. Are you trying to give me a heart attack? He closed the book and slammed it down on the wood beside him. America shrugged, then leaned his elbows on the side of the dock, right beside England. Do you ever, I don't know, have fun? I do believe I've told you, this is fun for me. He pointedly glared at America. America sighed, rather dramatically. Hey, England. What is it? You're lonely, he replied, his voice more. England blinked, green eyes expressing his bewilderment. I spend time alone. It's different. Again, as I have told you before, it's by choice. Damn, England, America gritted his teeth and sent a small splash at him, wetting his rolled-up pants. Stop that. You 22 years old and you're a freaking pirate, but you act like some kind of stodgy old man half the time. America's bottom lip jutted out in a pout. It's stupid. Stupid. England barked. Something being as stupid is rich coming from you. At this, America's eyes flashed and England was very glad he'd put his book down, because America grabbed him around the waist and yanked him into the water. Bloody hell. England shoved at America's chest, but he held fast. What in the blazes do you think you're doing? The water was up to England's chest, and the small waves lapped against his white shirt, soaking it even to his shoulders. Swimming, America replied, as if it were obvious. You? Being forced into the water by an idiot, England grumbled, crossing his arms as well as he could with America's grip on his waist. He was sure that his touch was causing his cheeks to burn. America just shrugged. You may not think you're lonely, but... He glanced down at the water. But I know you are. How do you know? I just do. America interrupted, tightening his grip on England's waist. They were still standing quite a bit apart, as America's arms were long. So I've decided that I'm going to make it my personal hero's mission to make sure you're not. What? Not lonely, of course, America clarified, and his cheeks were slightly pink. England's eyes grew large and his breath hitched in his throat. He could hear his heart speed up, and he willed it to slow down, but he knew it wouldn't. So you wish to be my champion? England finally managed, slight amusement in his voice. Huh? America blinked, nonplussed. England sighed. Never mind. America had still not let go of him, and he found his eyes wandering to his bare chest, taking in the curves and the depths and truly wanting to touch it. Fuck, he said out loud. America furrowed his brows. What? He paused. Oh, you mean like a knight? Yeah, sure. That's just another word for hero, after all. He beamed at England, that smile that he had such trouble tearing his eyes away from. America's hands were warm and firm around his waist, so close, and every few seconds he'd shift, as if running his hands up and down his back, which was surely not the case. All right, England whispered. I said, all right, he repeated, cheeks pink. If you think you can cure my so-called loneliness, who am I to stop you? It was stupid. America was just on one of his missions of righteousness, but England thought that maybe, perhaps, this was the best chance he was going to get. America's grin, if possible, grew. England barely had time to register that as he was pulled toward America in a bone-crushing hug. Now there was no space between them. America's head was resting near his shoulder, and his arms were tied around his mid-back. His naked chest was pressed against England, and his half-bare arms were stiff as they touched the taut skin he'd been eyeing just a moment before. And America was definitely not wearing his normal pants. England managed to look down enough to see the waistline of a pair of red boxers. Oh. Well. Do you have any idea what you're doing to me? England wanted to say, but the words died on his lips. His pants were feeling tighter, and he hoped to everything in the world that America didn't notice. If he hadn't already been in cold water, he imagined it would have been worse. I'm glad. America finally said, his breath tickling England's shoulder as he spoke. And he noticed that America's eyes were closed as he leaned against him, which caused just a bit more blood to rush to his face. Small waves lapped into and round them, and there was no noise but that, as well as the distant voices of England's crewmates on the shore. It was America that started to pull away first, and England felt a pang at this. But whether intentional or not, his cheek brushed against England's as he did so. They froze, mere centimeters from each other. America's eyes had never looked blue, accentuated by the bright sea they stood in and the sky they both loved, and complemented by the dusting of red on his cheeks. He closed his eyes and leaned in, just that fraction of a breath, and America must have done so as well, because England knew that he hadn't covered the full space between them before their lips met. His heart leapt, color burst behind his eyes, and England registered first that America's lips tasted of salt water. And they were warm just like the rest of him, and soft, and really, he was quite a smashing kisser, if he did say so. There were hands running along his back and then through the choppy blonde hair that hit the nape of his neck, and those hands could only belong to America was kissing him back. The cynic in him, strong as it was, couldn't form any kind of argument against the fact that America was very much running his fingers through England's hair and kissing him, so undeniably kissing him. And there was a moment in which America's tongue flickered forward, although perhaps England had imagined that, but nonetheless, he opened up his mouth slightly and gave purchase, allowing the other man to slide his tongue in, and England did the same and entered America's parted lips, and something was forming inside of him, warm and inviting anew, and it was that tenuous thread of hope, now much thicker, much less fragile, although still far from completely solid. He ran his hands through America's hair, much like he was doing to him, and he felt that one stubborn piece of hair that he noticed always stood up, and smiled a bit. Even when America's hair was wet, that chunk was stalwart in its defiance of gravity. America moved his hands down to England's shoulders, and England did the same, feeling the solid muscle of the other man's back and shoulders beneath his grasp. His pants were feeling quite a bit snugger though, and England cursed inwardly because he knew he would have to let go, lest America see the way in which he was reacting to their contact. A sound of displeasure escaped his throat because of it, and at that, America leapt away. He'd never seen an expression on America's face like this before. His eyes were huge and his mouth was agape and his cheeks were red to the point of scarlet. He looked like a child who had just gotten caught doing something terrible, breaking a cookie jar or accidentally destroying his mum's favorite rose bush. Not terribly romantic, but rather adorable. If America was that flushed, then England assumed that he was probably blushing to his bloody ears. Sorry. America finally managed, voice nary above a whisper. England merely nodded. It's fine, he rushed out the next part, but I've got to go. And he leapt up onto the dock before America could reply. His arousal was begging for release, and he rather hated his very own hormones at that moment because he'd left America in the water and left them both with all questions unanswered. It was one thing for them to have snogged, it was another for America to realize he was that into it. America would surely be disturbed, turned off by it. Even if by chance the kiss did mean something and America did like him back, he certainly wouldn't be ready to confront this. America, idealistic and quite possibly innocent, America would surely be horrified. And even though he was well aware that there was nothing unusual about his reaction to someone pressed tight against him, wed and kissing him, and he wasn't about to allow his blasted cock to ruin any chance he might have with the other man. He was halfway to the shore when he nearly ran smack dab into Pressure, who barked out a laugh immediately. Whoa, party in your pants, England. England attempted to deck him, but Pressure dodged. Hey now. What did you and America do that? Shut up, England gritted out, his tone convincingly threatening. Pressure held up his hands in surrender and let England run past him. Fine, he yelled as the captain reached the beach. I'll just ask America then. England could only glare at him balefully before continuing on his way. Chapter 18. Goodbyes. What just I kissed him. America lowered his face halfway into the water in a vain hope that his burning cheeks would be abated by the cold sea that lapped against them. It wasn't of any use. His blood seemed stalwart in its refusal to stop coaling his face, and he swore that it was even causing him to feel a bit lightheaded. He'd kissed England. Why had he kissed him? 1 minute he'd been proclaiming his heroic mission, then he'd hugged him because hey, why not? He embraced his friends and... Oh, who the hell was he kidding? He liked hugging England. America lifted his head from the water to take a breath and then submerged again. Liked the feel of England in his arms, the way he enveloped him so easily, surrounding him and... It was cute the way England was flush deep when they pulled away, the crimson stain spreading across his face, and he swore all the way to his ears. His eyes had been wide, their brilliant green only accentuated by the red of his cheeks. After he'd leapt away, he knew he'd looked at England as if he, America, had done something terribly wrong. He hoped he hadn't given England the wrong idea by reacting in such a manner. Whatever the hell the right idea was anyway. He'd kissed England. England had kissed him back, very much so, what with the tongue and the... America submerged himself completely now, splashing with his arms as he descended underwater, crossed his arms, bent his knees, and stood there, beneath the waves. He closed his eyes and blew bubbles, enjoying the feel of the light current and the way in which his hair tickled his face. The kissing had been nice. Shit. Damn, it had been nice and it had felt so good, and what the hell was going on anyway? And America felt as if his head may explode at any moment. Although England had stormed off, but that couldn't have been because of America's kissing skills, because surely they were amazing and awesome, plus he had just agreed to let America be his hero, so he must like him at least as a friend, and the kissing would indicate that England. All right, let's clear this up. He shook his head, the rush of the ocean whipping by as he did so. I kissed England. He kissed me. I liked it. He pushed his knees up and rose out of the water, taking a deep breath and sifting a hand through his soaking hair as he stared at the endless blue sea beyond him. Weird. America was snapped out of his reverie by the sound of someone clearing their throat. He whipped around, his eyes meeting Pressure's. He was leering at him from a crouching position on the end of the dock. What do you want? America asked, hoping and praying that the flush on his face had dissipated. Pressure's hands were resting on his knees, and he broke out a bark of a laugh. I just have got to know what exactly happened to cause England to run off all excited like that. America knew that his cheeks were red now, and he gaped, rather like a fish. I've got no idea what the hell you're dash. Pressure rolled his eyes. Really, man? I'm happy that you two apparently, whatever you did. He paused. I was hoping my awesome talk earlier would help you along, so make sure you give credit to the awesome me. Nothing like that happened. America waved his hands wildly in front of them. Pressure sat down entirely, dangling his bare feet over the edge of the dock. Ha! Get your mind out of the gutter, boy toy. You could just touch England well looking like you do right now, and he'd probably have to run off and service himself. America stared at Pressure, straight on, a defiant frown crossing his lips. So it's not like I'm saying you ripped each other's clothes off or... Fuck off. America shouted, thrusting his arms forward and splashing Pressure vehemently. What happened between me and England is, it's none of your business. At this, Pressure smirked. Firstly, I'm already wet, man. Splashing me is sort of lying. He pointed a finger. Secondly, haven't we gone over this? As great as it is to make fun of you two, I really do want it to work out. So whether you groped each other's butt cheeks or kissed. At this, America's face flooded with color again, and he cursed inwardly, biting his lip in attempt to stop himself from saying something that might give him away. Pressure laughed, loud and booming and annoying, and America just wanted him to stop because he swore he was only becoming redder by the moment. You kissed? America opened his mouth to deny it, but Pressure continued first. He whooped, laughed again, and raised his arms above his head, then stood up and brushed his legs off. That is awesome. He turned and began to walk away, leaving America without a chance to reply. America's fingers moved to his lips, as if musing on what exactly had occurred in that region of his body. Upon realizing his action, however, he pulled them away like he was touching a hot coal and smacked his forehead in frustration. Watch Pressure tell everyone on this damn island. He dumped his head underwater again and swam outward in attempt to cool his nerves. America padded onto the flight pad, bare feet hot on the concrete and boots and other clothing in his arms. He shook his head to free the remaining loose moisture from his hair as he approached his plane. He had swum until he'd grown exhausted of it, his fingers and toes long since pruned by the time he stepped out of the water. The cool blue sea had welcomed him, his strong arms and legs carrying him out to the reef where he surveyed, as best as he could without goggles, the tropical fish and the corals and the color and the sun-kissed sky above the sea. But staring at the sky, instead of reminding him of being in his plane and soaring through the clouds, as it usually did, had made his mind wander back to England. He was trying very hard not to think about England. Although if the fucking sky reminded him of him, he was screwed. There was nothing he loved more than the sky, after all. Damn it. All right. He was going to change out of his wet clothes, and the duffel bag was now in his plane. After that, considering how his head was swimming and he was still trying to make sense of that, he thought maybe he'd ask Australia if he could have a beer. If he had enough to supply Pressure's habit, he could definitely spare America one. He hopped into his plane, wincing at the uncomfortable feeling of wet boxer shorts squelching on the leather of the chair, and reached behind to grab his duffel bag, throwing his dirty items back there as he did so. He paused once he'd napped it and turned back around to stare at his radio. One good thing had come of England shooting it, outside of giving him an excuse for his absence, of course. Once Canada had repaired it, it actually worked a little better than before, less static and crackling inhibiting his conversations. America took a deep breath and ran his fingers across the dials of the radio. He had told France and Canada where he was going, but the exact destination was something they'd no idea of. Nor had they been notified of when he'd be back. America himself had no idea, after all. He should radio them, America thought. After last time where Canada had been worried sick and he'd actually felt really shitty about causing his crew to freak out, he didn't want something like that to occur again. A hero didn't allow his friends to fret for no reason. America tuned in the frequency of his hangar, reminding himself to keep it short as per England's warnings about keeping the location private. Captain Jones, this is Captain Jones speaking, he began, once the crackle of the radio had cleared. A few moments' silence and a clear voice replied. Captain. Good afternoon, Captain. Japan. Hey there, Japan, he replied casually. What's been up? I'm doing very well. May I ask what's been up with you? I heard you were going out on something related to the Cosmoda. Oh, that was right, Japan was the only one who didn't know about England. America winced. He felt a little bad that Japan was still in the dark, especially when France of all people knew it. It's going awesome, he lied. I have a ton of information. The colonel is definitely going to be pleased with me. He patted the list in his pocket, and a realization dawned on him. He couldn't give this list to the colonel or anyone else, save perhaps the rest of his unit. He had made a promise to England regarding the names on that list, and he had no desire to break it. The idea of disappointing England like that left an uncomfortable feeling in the pit of his stomach. But the Zeppelin specifications and the other information, he could provide the military that. And they definitely think him an awesome captain and an awesome hero for doing so. That's wonderful, Captain. Japan exclaimed, his voice still quiet. Then I take it you're ready to return to the base. Huh? Japan laughed lightly. I was hoping you'd radio because we attempted to get a hold of you to no avail before now. Well, I wasn't in my plane. I assumed as much, and Mr. Williams and Private Bonnefoy agreed. Ah, yeah. Cool then. Glad I didn't worry you, although you shouldn't worry about a pilot like me anyway. Colonel's orders, you need to return to the base. Our unit has been chosen to take charge of Cosmoda-related activities for this base. Really? America grinned, pained. That's awesome. I mean, we are finally going to get to do something, and we've been put at the head of something so important. Ha, those bastards are going down. Well, we'll still be taking orders from above. Yeah, I mean of course, but... Seriously, this is the coolest thing. America was leaning back in his chair now, grin having only widened as he stared upward. This was surreal in the best way possible. I thought you would be excited, Captain Giants. America, he said, drawing it out. America, he corrected, reluctantly. I know you'll be good for the job. You're very passionate about this. He laughed awkwardly and rubbed the back of his head. Ah yeah, you've noticed. It's just, man, it's terrible, and it can't keep happening, and shit, actually I've got to keep this short. I need to come back, he trailed off the last sentence, frowning when his chest tightened slightly at the idea of leaving the tropical island behind, of leaving England. By tomorrow morning. We have a meeting with General Wen at 11 a.m. You'll be able to return in plenty of time, I hope. Why yeah, it won't be a problem, Japan, America replied, biting his lip. He was thrilled with the assignment. It was a dream come true, really. But this island, the Victoria crew, England. He sighed and forced a cheerful tone. Thanks for telling me. You're the most awesome friend ever, Japan. Thank you, Cap America, you know how deeply I value your friendship as well. CYA. Clear skies, America. He clicked off the radio and rubbed his forehead. He simultaneously wanted to jump up and down and radio Japan back, asking if they could move the meeting to the next day. But he had a job to do, and there was nothing more important than fighting the Cosmoda. And now he had a real chance to make a difference, because he wasn't going to allow the military to ignore the problem if he was in charge. America grabbed his duffel bag and leapt out of the cockpit, heading toward the HUD Australia had by the beach in order to change. America spotted England sitting on the beach, close enough to the surf that the water was tickling his toes when he exited the hut. His soaked shirt and pants appeared somewhat dry by now, the afternoon sun having worked quickly on them, and he was leaning back on his arms, as if staring skyward. His expression was neutral, and his vivid green eyes were wide as they surveyed the blue above. He approached England, quietly, and paused, hovering over him before tapping him on the shoulder. Hey. England merely nodded. Hello, America. America shifted awkwardly on his feet and then sat down next to him, pulling his legs up crossed beneath him so they wouldn't get wet. So, I can't wait to get back to the sky, England began. Bloody hell, the beach is beautiful, but I miss flying in my Victoria like nothing else. He smiled. Yeah, this place is pretty awesome, but I know what you mean, America paused. Hesitantly, he placed a hand on England's knee. England's eyes grew large and his cheeks flushed red. Hey, America, I... Huh? Should we talk? England managed, his voice quiet. America pulled his hand off England and darted his eyes away, willing the blush not to rise on his own cheeks. It didn't work. Don't take this some weird way, but... I have to leave, England. England sighed and moved his arms into his lap. Oh. I see. I got put in charge of the cosmoder activities at my base. America exclaimed, rubbing the back of his head. It's great, England. I can finally do something without sneaking around and stuff. We'll definitely be able to handle them with military action, I'm sure. England chuckled sardonically. I suppose you won't be needing any more help from pirates then, will you? America blinked. What? Never mind, if you've got to go, you've got to go. America bit his lip. If it weren't so important to leave, I wouldn't mind staying here for a while. His cheeks were still pink, he knew it. Why you wouldn't? England glanced at him, something in his eyes, something like what America had seen when they pulled apart from their embrace right before they'd. Nah, I mean it's a lot of fun here. England shook his head. I'm pleased you think so. Don't get me wrong, it's hardly meant to be a tropical getaway, so I don't care if you had fun or no dash. England. America took a deep breath. I hear we should probably talk, huh? England nodded. Well, you're probably leaving here soon, and I don't know when I can get away from the base. I suppose we could meet at Valakva, England mused, almost under his breath. Is that some kind of secret pirate getaway? His lips quirked up. A hellhole of crying. Oh, shut up. It's the inn and pub I told you about before. You should have the name memorized, since I told you to throw the paper away. America laughed nervously. I kind of forgot to throw it away. Idiot. I didn't tell anyone, he defended. All right, I believe you. So the Valakva Inn and pub, and I'll be meeting up with the unicorn, right? America inquired, amusement in his tone. England huffed and crossed his arms. Yes, all right. Just radio me when you think you can clear your schedule. America stood up and clapped a hand on England's shoulder. It's a date, then. At this, England's face exploded red, and he nodded rather firmly. Very well then. Awesome. He sighed, I've really got to go though, so you wanna come see me off? England shook his head in the positive and pushed himself up, brushing the sand off his rear as he did so. You going to need something to eat for the trip home? I actually caught Australia on the way from the plane to that hut I changed clothes in and is packing me up something. America shrugged. I was kind of aching for a beer, but that was before I knew I was going to be flying back. Are you decent on fuel? Australia is taking care of that as well. They were walking now along the beach and toward the platform America's plane rested on. Glancing back, America spotted the rest of the crew. Spain and Romano were still lounging in the shallow surf, Sealand and Liechtenstein were playing some strange form of hopscotch they'd drawn in the sand, and Prussia and Switzerland were talking amongst themselves, both sitting in their own wicker chairs. He smiled fondly, unbidden. Hey, he called back, shouting. I'm leaving, so bye everyone. Spain and Romano waved from their places on the beach, Romano with a frown. Sealand and Liechtenstein ran over, so they were walking alongside America and England, and Prussia pushed himself out of the chair to join them, Switzerland following behind. It was Switzerland that approached America first once they reached the platform. He roughly pulled him aside, out of England's earshot, and glared at him. America blinked. Prussia told me what happened between you two, he began shortly. America's cheeks flooded with color. It's not up to me to judge the captain's choices, but I will say. Switzerland grabbed America's collar, his green eyes hard. That if you hurt him in any way, I will shoot you, and I won't miss. America gulped because he'd seen Switzerland with his arsenal of weapons, and damn, he would not want to be on his bad side. Why would I hurt England, was his simple reply. Switzerland just nodded and let go of his collar. That's what I wanted to hear. He turned away. See you then. America shuddered inwardly. What the hell? That's just Switzerland, Prussia interrupted, smacking America on the back. He started. But he will totally kick your ass if you screw with England. I don't plan dash. By screwing with, I don't mean screwing, of course. He smirked deviously. You're welcome to do that. Ha ha. Shut up. America snapped, blushing. Yeah, well. Pressure smiled, softer, without that edge of mischief. See you later, man. America nodded, and Pressure patted his back one more time before walking away. He stepped toward his plane and met Australia along the way. Done filling you up, and here's some food to go, mate, Australia said, grinning at him with his grease-stained face. America took a brown bag from the other man's hand and nodded in gratitude. Thanks. He turned back around, where the Victoria crew, including Spain and Romana, who had left their surfside spot after all, stood facing him. England was in the forefront, with a sort of cautious smile. You're off now, he asked. Why, sorry I can't stay longer, America answered, a flicker of the frown on his lips. England tilted his chin up. Quite all right. I know you're needed back at your base. It doesn't bode well when I do believe that you may be one of the most competent soldiers there. Hey. But England's insult felt weak, more teasing than anything. Well, you'd better get up in the air again, so you can steal some more tea kettles for your stove or something. America turned around and began to step into his plane, but England's hand on his back stopped him. He swerved to look at the other man. England was glancing to and fro, as if making sure his crew was not able to eavesdrop on this. They were standing only a few meters away, so it was no surprise that England practically whispered when he began to speak. Just because you're going to be all big shot in the military now, don't think I won't still be fighting as well. Huh? I mean to say that, I hope we can still work together on this, America, he clarified. Hey. I mean we set up that meeting, we can still exchange information and work together and... America rushed out the next part, hang out and stuff. England closed his eyes for a moment. It's not just the Cosmida that I want to work together with you on. And America couldn't miss how embarrassed he looked saying those words. I would like to. So would. He exhaled deeply. Oh, never mind. You'd what? America scratched the back of his head. It's nothing, England replied. Just as long as I know I'll see you again. Course you will, he replied confidently. Now I've really got to go. Yes. No. America hopped halfway into the cockpit, one side still dangling out, when England reached forward to shake his hand. America grinned at this and knocked his hand aside, instead deciding to wrap the other man in a one-armed hug. England leaned into his shoulder and America could see his contented smile out his peripheral vision. He tousled England's hair and whispered into his ear, "See you later, England." England's hands rubbed up and down America's back as he replied, "Then I suppose I'll look forward to it." Chapter 19. Palace of Snow and Ice. It was white, so white that when Ukraine had first seen it, she'd remembered thinking that it felt as if she were inside an immense palace of snow. The ceilings were high and domed, and the floor was as gleaming as ice. But it was not royalty that this pure-white palace housed, but instead the growing fleet of the Cosmida. It was here, in this remote snowbound citadel shrouded in the northernmost regions of Medved, that the Cosmida built themselves up, zeppelin upon zeppelin, nearly invisible in the wind-whipped, frigid, white landscape. There were few splashes of color in the fortress, a flash of silver, Belarus practicing with her blade in an open space. But mostly it was black, the deep dark of the Cosmida uniforms dotting the room like smudges of charcoal on an ivory surface. Ukraine wrapped her arms around herself, chilly despite the warm wool of her uniform. This was her charge, to watch and regulate the building of the Cosmida zeppelins. Russia had given it to her, and what choice did she have but to? "Sister," a voice snapped her out of her reverie, soft, gentle, Russia's. And he was alone, because he never referred to her by sister unless they were out of earshot of other Cosmida members. Ukraine turned around, greeting her younger brother. His bay scarf stood out against his black uniform, and he smiled. "Good afternoon, brother. I'm glad I stopped by, He paused and Ukraine felt him surveying her. She bit her lip and fought back a small wave of tears. She'd always struggled with holding in her emotions, and lately seeing him made it so difficult not to cry. He wasn't supposed to be like, "The construction of our fleet is going as well as you'd promised, sister. I am so pleased with your work." "Thank you, brother." She nodded. Russia's large hand landed on her shoulder, and she recalled a smaller pair of hands, covered in warm mittens and wrapped gently around her shoulders. An embrace. An adjusting of a scarf when they'd pulled apart. A smile as she told him, "You're almost as tall as me now, little brother. Do you see, everyone is working so hard for us, dear sister." He pointed a finger toward the fleet of black-clad workers, zeppelins coming together piece by piece under their care. So many people have joined us in sharing our drain. It won't be long until it's accomplished. Ukraine's eyes welled up again, and she stifled a sniffle. "Brother, what if everyone doesn't share the same dream you do?" she queried, voice quiet, cautious. At this, Russia's hand left her shoulder, and a frown flickered across his face, just a blink of a change in expression before his smile was back in place. "It was ultimately everyone here's decision to join me, sister." His voice lowered in pitch near the end of the sentence, and there was a tinge of ire to his tone. "That is, no one will stand in my way, Ukraine." And despite his almost gentle tone, his words were frosty, and they sent a chill through Ukraine. She frowned and nodded, turning away from him so as to disallow him from seeing the large salty tears that now fell freely from her eyes. Ukraine would stand beside him and protect him. She'd vowed to do so when he was small, when the chill of the Median winter was the greatest danger they'd faced. But it was getting harder to do so now, because Ukraine had no idea how to protect Russia from what he was facing now. Her heart ached every time she realized that she was at a loss as to how to protect him from himself. A pounding of footsteps, and she peeked over her shoulder to see Lithuania approaching. Lithuania, Russia's favorite soldier, his trusted general, greeted the other man with a salute. "And you asked to see me, sir?" Russia nodded. "Indeed, Lithuania. I have some very important matters to discuss, if you'll follow me." He didn't say goodbye to Ukraine, merely giving her a wayward backward glance as he walked away, Lithuania trailing behind. America wanted more than anything to sleep. He wanted to curl up in his bedsheets and nuzzle into his pillow and drift off into a dreamless sleep and be well rested and awake for the meeting with China the next day. This was his big break, after all. So when, upon pulling the sheets and comforter over him and plopping his head down onto the pillow, he heard a rather loud knock on the door of his room, he cursed. "America, let me in," came France's muffled voice. "Oh, most definitely not." He was not going to come back from a lengthy flight, sleep-deprived, just to have to talk to France. Especially since he had no doubt that France was going to bring up, "Oh, you do not wish to let me in? I guess I can talk to you about England from outside the door then." Before he even finished his sentence, America had darted up from the bed and over to the door, swinging it open and frowning. "What do you want, France?" France held up his hands in mock surrender. The hallway was empty behind him, America noted as he peeked around him. "Just come in, okay?" America shook his head and yawned, running a hand through his blonde hair. France stepped into the room and took a quick gander at America's bed, the sheets ruffled from his quick dart to the door. "Ha ha, not funny. Sit in the chair." America gestured to the small wooden chair that sat beside his desk. "Very well then," France sighed as he sat down. "I imagine that I will just have to come to terms with you no longer being available." America's face flashed at this, and he plopped down onto the edge of his bed in a sulk. "I was never available to you anyway." France shrugged. "You've always played hard to get. If you and England ever—" "Shut up." He leapt from the bed and grabbed a pile of comic books from atop his nightstand, lining them up in the middle of the floor. When that wasn't enough, he snatched his extra pair of goggles, a few flight manuals, a dirty pair of pants, and 4 records. The line was splayed out in the middle of the room, stretching vertically from the area between his nightstand and his desk and the end of his bed. "Don't cross this line, France." "No, what did you come here for?" France chuckled. "I only wanted to speak to you, America." America shifted, feeling irritable and tired. He picked his glasses up from the nightstand and put them back on, then sat down on the bed again. "Go for it then. I've got to get to bed so I can wake up and be ready tomorrow." "About that." France tapped his fingers on the desk. "Congratulations. I know how much you wanted to help out with this, America." America's eyes widened and a small smile crossed his lips. "Thanks. I only hope." He trailed off. "Huh?" France began again. "I meant to say I only hope that you do not become content with this." "What do you mean by that?" America queried. "This is gonna be great. With me at the head, I won't let the Cosmoda get any further. Franz exhaled. I just worry that you will go back to how you were before now. How was it before? Before England, Franz clarified. When you questioned the military that day, wondered why they were not taking action with the Cosmoda. Well, now they are. That, yes, exactly that. Franz leaned back in his chair. I just mean that I hope you do not go back to blindly following the military. What? And by the way, if you need any tips on long-distance relationships, I would be more than happy to dash. Did you come here for any other reason but to criticize me? America bit out, frustration rising. Here I thought you might actually be happy for me about my assignment. I am America. Franz leaned forward on his hands and leveled him a look. I wish to believe, though, that you will not be appeased by this. Now that you have your way, now that they are acting as you desired, will you bend again to their every whim? America sucked in a breath. I'm a hero. I do what's right, and it's obvious the military knows what's right now. Franz frowned and rubbed the stubble on his chin. But what of England? You care about him, OUI. America bloomed red at this, and he clenched a fist. Franz, his tone had a hint of warning to it. I am not speaking of anything but the simple fact that you must care about him, he clarified. America relaxed and nodded. Yeah, I do, he replied softly. You would defy the military for him, still, Franz said, as if it were a fact. You feel so strongly, America. You always have. Such passion. He crossed his arms. Passion. Franz, stop with the... I do not mean that in any way but innocent, he interrupted. None, I am being serious here. I just mean to say that if you feel half as strongly for England, for your hope of taking down the Cosmoda, as I believe you probably do, is there even a question? America looked down, surveying his floor as if it were the most fascinating thing in the world. This is not to say that I think the military will definitely steer you wrong, Franz continued. But if you are in a situation where your superiors tell you to turn right, and you know that the best thing to do is to turn left, please do it. He stood up and walked across the room, ignoring America's line of belongings. There is nothing more dangerous than complacency, America. The expression on Franz's face was completely serious. His eyes were intense and his lips formed a hard line. America shook his head in the positive. I'm not gonna promise you anything, Franz. What I do is up to me. Franz smiled lightly. That will do for now. He sat down on the bed beside America, who grumbled and gave him a light shove. Shall I give you some advice regarding England now that we have this sorted? No. You can leave now. America crossed his arms in irritation. Franz tutted and stood up, walking toward the door and turning around before he left. All right, America. I will leave for tonight. I understand the importance of your meeting tomorrow. But if you ever need advice, you know there's no one better than me. Although, I still question your taste. England, really. He found himself with a face full of downy softness, America having soundly thrown a very feathery pillow at him. Franz tossed the pillow and left the room, peeking back in before closing the door. Good night, Captain. America Jones, captain of the 35th Unit of the World Aviation Force, Aquila Division, Resha stated, placing a black and white photograph on the table between himself and Lithuania. Do you recognize him, Lithuania? Lithuania blinked, surveying the photograph in front of him. The young flyboy was proudly saluting, a broad smile on his face. No, sir, I don't. He looks spirited, doesn't he? Resha queried, leveling his smile at his general. I guess he does, he replied. In truth, even from the photograph, Lithuania thought the aviator radiated life. The sun shone down upon and illuminated both him and the plane he stood in front of, and Lithuania felt a tint of envy for the young man, this America, whoever he was. He looked free. You may not recognize him, but I do believe you've met. Russia ran a finger over the photo, swiveling it around on the table. Surely you remember the pilot who fought alongside the Taliesin, yes. Lithuania's green eyes widened as he recalled that battle and the military craft that had shown up out of nowhere, taking down one of the Cosmoda zeppelins. I remember him. Remember what I told you about the danger the sky pirates present to our plans? Yes. This boy could be just as dangerous, I think, Russia continued. He is a link between the pirates and the military, and it's even more than that. He's strong, idealistic, and has just been given a position of power that I really do not approve of. It is he who will be in charge of acting against us, it appears. Sir? Lithuania inhaled sharply. What are you proposing? I've learned a lot about America Jones recently, and I want him out of the way. Lithuania gulped and nodded, beads of sweat forming on the palms of his hands. And are you asking what your role in this will be? Russia inquired, soft, sweet, as if his words were innocent as a lamb. That is yet to be determined, but this America, this young captain with his smile and his dreams and his spirit. He picked up the photo and turned it in his hand before crumpling it into a ball. His dreams are not ours. We will devastate them. Lithuania clenched his eyes shut, his heart beating wildly in his chest. That man, that brave flyboy who had defended the pirate ship so boldly. He remembered watching the aircraft from his spot in the Zeppelin, watching as it zipped through the sky, cutting through the wind as if it were nothing, dodging the missiles his crew had deployed, and so easily, with swift and tactical strikes, knocking one of Russia's white beasts out of the sky. Lithuania was sure that America and Russia did not share the same dreams, but he wondered if he and America may. Belarus, you may come in. Lithuania snapped his eyes open at Russia's words. The door creaked open, bringing with it the sound of the Zeppelin production, voices yelling, machinery running, steam puffing, in addition to Belarus' feet clattering on the floor as she rushed in. How did you know I was there, Russia, dear? Belarus asked, and Lithuania noted that her sword was held at her side, having just been practicing with a blade. Russia let out a whisper of a laugh. I heard you, of course. You were quiet, but not too quiet for me. Belarus tensed at this. Sit down, Belarus. She moved to sit next to Russia, and he shook his head. By Lithuania, please. She pouted and plopped down next to him, the end of her blade sheath jutting into his leg. Lithuania shifted away. Belarus really was beautiful, and her skill was admirable and honestly breathtaking. At times Lithuania found himself watching her practice, numbing his mind to what darkness Belarus was truly capable of, so he could just be in awe of the way in which she moved. Her hair always whipped about her face, but she never pulled it back, a headband being the only thing that kept it from flying to astray. She wore a dress instead of the standard Cosmeta uniform, although it was still black and silver. This was, Belarus claimed, so she could hide her daggers beneath her skirts. She was lethal, and Lithuania found himself both frightened and amazed by her. In that manner, Lithuania also considered her to be a perfect match for Russia, and he bemoaned the fact that Russia did not agree. Russia would rather have him, Russia would always rather have Lithuania. I assume you heard my discussion with Lithuania, yes? Russia asked. I did not mean to. It's all right. There's nothing I told him that you can't know, Belarus, he interrupted. I trust your loyalty. I promise you will find none more loyal, Belarus answered, her expression genuine. Please, Russia, dear. May I have a mission? I could be the one to take out Captain Jones for you. Russia shook his head. It is not my mission to see him dead, Belarus. She gritted her teeth. Then I guess Lithuania is the one for this. He couldn't hurt a fly, dear. Can't you see? He does not share the dream we do, the one you speak of. He is so rude, Belarus, and while Lithuania is sitting right next to you. If you care so deeply for me, why do you continually question me? Russia asked, leveling her a glare. I lie. His smile returned, and there was a lilt to his voice. Please go back to practice, Belarus. There will be work for us all soon, you included. Belarus stood up and nodded, firm, staunch. She sauntered over to Russia and placed a kiss atop his head before leaving the room. England was in America's room. Well, not his room, but the cabin he'd taken to staying in the nights he'd slept aboard the Victoria. America hadn't made the bed, bloody terrible guest, that morning, and so England was curled up in the same arrangement of twisted sheets and wrinkled comforter that America had left behind that morning. He was lying in America's bed, and he berated himself for it. Honestly, if any of his crew were to walk in on this, he would never live it down. As such, he'd waited until they were fast asleep, and luckily for him, Pressure had passed out inebriated on the beach again to pad down to the cabin America had stayed in. The pillow still bore the indentation from America's head, and for Christ's sake he felt like such a fucking idiot for wrapping the sheets around him and taking in the smell that was America, and he just hated how much he missed him already. Not so much missed that he wasn't there, but missed him because he had no idea the next time he would see him. America had sent him a quick radio when he'd arrived at the base, letting him know he'd gotten back safely and then telling him, "Good night, I gotta sleep, seriously." England had appreciated that. No flight was ever without its hazards, but especially not now with the Cosmoda. He ghosted his fingers across his lips and shook his head. He wanted answers, and he wanted them now, not when America had free time, although as much as he was loath to admit it, he could hardly ask him to ditch his stupid job to talk about what had occurred. The scene in the water replayed in his mind continually, the way in which America had held him and kissed him, and he was certain that no one had kissed first, that they'd honestly done it at the same time. Consensually. Then there was the fact that apparently shaking hands had not been enough for America when he'd left. Instead, America had embraced him, ruffled his hair, and whispered in his ear. And that was... Inland's eyes slid shut, and he felt himself drifting off, the warmth of the bed and the lingering presence of that imbecile who had somehow garnered his affections, lulling him to sleep. He shook his head and darted up, leaving the room behind with one wayward glance. He could hardly stay in there. No amount of hours on the mast or extra chores for anyone on his crew would save him from the humiliation of being found in that cabin in the morning.